Chapter 507. Nowadays, the city walls were not as hard as iron as people thought, and they were not built with regular boulders. They were built with stones, yellow mud, glutinous rice juice, lime, and other materials. Cheng'an district was just a small and remote district in the north. How hard could the city walls be? It was not a problem to block normal attacks, but it was a little difficult to deal with the catapult that Zhang Pengji had modified. What she used was a giant catapult. Theoretically, it could even make a deep hole in the city wall of Shangjing, not to mention the city wall of Cheng'an district. Although the city wall was strong, the power of the extraterrestrial emissaries was beyond imagination. Even the demolition team wasn't that brutal. Apart from Zhang Pengji, Zhang Ping, and the audience in the streaming room, no one knew it was so powerful. Jin Tian Wuging. Damn, this catapult reminds me of the Xiangyang cannon used by the Mongolians when they attacked Xiangyang city. It's also a type of counterweight catapult. It's said that it's very powerful and can create a 2-meter deep pit on the ground. This is the first gung. Isn't the original model of the catapult the Xiangyang cannon? Yiqing Zhou. I'm not sure. I watched the live stream for the past few days, and the host made changes based on the current situation. Anyway, a liberal arts student wouldn't be able to understand such a complicated design. They only knew that the streamer and Zhang Ping from the Mo family had a long discussion. Jiang Nongqin calmly directed the catapult to throw 5 rounds. The city wall was already riddled with holes. The Qingyi army on the wall had suffered heavy casualties. They lacked sufficient bows and arrows and had lost the high ground. They were unable to mount an effective resistance to the subsequent assault. Zhang Pengji ordered the catapult to stop throwing stones. She issued a few military orders in succession. More than 10 elevator ladders were pushed out from the military formation. The ladders of this era were only sturdier and longer ladders. They did not have the function of protecting the vanguard of a siege. In a siege battle, the attacking side would usually suffer more losses than the defending side. This was because if the attacking side wanted to get close to the city walls, they would have to put themselves in the attacking range of the defending side. The other side had the geographical advantage, so the attacking side would often have to pile up the lives of the soldiers, set up ladders, and then forcibly attack the city walls or break the city gates. Naturally, the casualty rate was very high. Of course, if the attacking party chose to dig a tunnel and sneak into the city, it would be a different story. She was planning to destroy the city with brute force, so she was too lazy to let people dig tunnels like field mice. When Zhang Pengji was building the ladder, she referred to the existing information and literature in this world and built her ladder on this basis. There were circular rollers made of hardwood at the bottom of the elevator ladder, which could be used as solid tires to facilitate the movement of the entire ladder. As for why there was a lift function, she had 2 considerations. Firstly, the scale of the ladder was too large, which could easily alert the enemy scouts and reveal the secret of their armaments. If she could fold the ladder, it would greatly reduce the possibility of exposure. The defenders would think that she did not prepare any siege weapons, and they might let their guard down. Secondly, the height of the city walls throughout the era was not the same. Some of the city walls were majestic, such as the former Shangjing city. Some of the city walls were just mounds of earth that were slightly higher than the earthen walls. The elevator could adjust the height according to the situation of the city walls. Apart from these details, the biggest breakthrough was the structure of the base of the ladder, which could hide people. When the soldiers pushed the ladder, they could hide inside or under the ladder. They could use heavy shields to resist the attacks on the city walls. With a shelter, even if the enemy shot a rain of arrows, the soldiers pushing the ladder could still successfully put the ladder on the city walls. The Qingyi army on the city walls had already been wiped out, and the successors had not had time to replenish, so the danger of climbing the city walls was the lowest. She gave a military order, and the horn sounded again with a different rhythm. The infantry of the vanguard battalion, who had suppressed their fighting spirit, climbed up the ladder first. They jumped up faster than monkeys. Which man did not want to make contributions? Especially when they saw that the female battalion was more agile than them. If the male soldiers did not live up to expectations, how could they look at their faces? When the Qingyi army sent people to support them, it was already a little late. The soldiers in leather armor pulled out their broadswords and slashed people. There was a chaotic battle on the city walls. More and more soldiers climbed up the city walls with the help of the ladder. They gradually gained the advantage of numbers. Although the Qingyi army was a group of dragons without a leader, there were still many small leaders. Now it was too late to escape. They could only try their best to defend the city gates and block the enemy outside as much as possible. Only then would they have a chance of survival. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that in a short period of time, the number of soldiers that could climb up the ladders was limited. As long as they guarded the city gates and did not break, and concentrated their forces to deal with the people on the city walls, it was not impossible for the Xueqi army to defend Xueqi district. While they were dreaming, dozens of soldiers carried a round log that required 3 people to hug it. They were prepared to break open the tightly shut city gates. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The soldiers silently recited the number. When they counted to 3, they exerted their strength together. Previously, the catapult had smashed the city walls, and more or less affected the city gates. After the soldiers attacked the city gates together for more than 10 times, the city gates broke open, revealing more than 100 Xueqi army soldiers and various obstacles behind the gates. The troops from both sides fought at the city gates, and the sounds of killing were incessant. Fresh blood splattered, and broken limbs and bones were everywhere. The blood that flowed out converged into a gurgling stream, like a meandering red snake. In the battle at the city gates, the Xueqi army was utterly defeated. They were simply unable to form an effective defense and attack. The troops attacked the city gates. Dozens of peculiar-looking rolling chariots were put to use. The chariots looked very simple. They lifted the cover hanging on them and revealed the true appearance of the chariots. There were 21 spears that were 7 to 8 feet long stuck in the front of the chariots. The tips were extremely sharp, and the sides were full of sharp short blades. The troops saw the situation and retreated. They ordered their comrades at the back to push the chariots to the front of the troops and rush into the city. This kind of chariot was specially used to fight in the alleys after the city was breached. It was like a hedgehog with sharp thorns. It was difficult for the enemy to get close. The Xueqi army was like a group of dragons without a leader. The small chieftains did not even have time to escape. How could they organize an effective defense on the battlefield? The troops on Jiangpengji's side first broke the high walls outside. They pushed into the inner city as if they were cutting vegetables and tofu. They left a bloody path along the way. The Xueqi army fled when they saw people. They even squeezed into a corner and trampled on them. Their faces were full of fear and despair. Compared to the Xueqi army who had not eaten their fill for a few days, Jiangpengji did not treat her troops harshly. Not to mention how good the food was, at least it would not make anyone tighten their belts and go to the battlefield with hunger. Meng Hun had not seen blood for a long time. When the city was breached, he led his men and rushed to the front. Li Yun was not to be outdone. He rode his horse and rushed into the city gates of Xueqi district. Relying on his dexterity, he killed many members of the Xueqi army who could not escape in time. He waved his silver spear countless times. Dazzling blood splattered everywhere. The blood even dyed the white horse he was riding on red. Chapter 508. Jiangpengji heaved a long sigh. If she could, she really did not want to bring these little princesses into battle in the future. Even if she had to, she could only bring those who were soft-hearted and easy to talk to. Look at these 2 people. They were so bold that they even dared to stop their lord from entering the battlefield. How disgraceful. Humph. She gazed at the gates of Xueqi district in the distance. Her hands that were holding onto the reins felt a little itchy, and Dubai couldn't help but snort restlessly. Wei Ci pretended not to know what his lord was feeling emotional about. Even though he could not bear to do so, he still held it in. Blades and swords had no eyes on the battlefield. Even if she had been victorious in every battle, she could not guarantee that she would be unscathed. With the passage of time, who could guarantee that these accumulated old injuries would not become hidden dangers in the future? Xueqi, on the other hand, could not stay calm. Jiangpengji's resentful gaze made him feel guilty. He braced himself and said, "My lord, you can't put yourself in danger so easily." Jiangpengji secretly curled her lips. Even if she thought with her toes, she would know that it was a lame reason. "I alone can fight against hundreds of people," she said. "If that's the case, I would rather the Lord order another few hundred soldiers to participate in the battle." Wei Ci, who was standing at the side, interjected quietly. Jiangpengji was speechless. This Wei Ci was exceptionally vengeful. So he really had a grudge against her? In terms of combat power, she could break the gates of Cheng and County all by herself. There was no need for dozens of soldiers to carry the huge logs. Looking at the strenuous posture of the soldiers banging on the door, Jiang Pengji wished she could chase them aside and let them see what absolute strength was. However, Wei Ci and Su Ku, the two scholars who had no strength to truss a chicken, stared at her from both sides and did not allow her to act rashly. Her resentment seemed to be able to pass through the live broadcast screen, and the audience could not help but laugh. Some audience members could still give her some face and just smiled. Some audience members were more mischievous and directly sent bullet screens to mock her. Mian, ha ha ha, Beauty Ci and brother Suku did a great job. The streamer is so unrestrained that she needs to be disciplined. Ginseng Kuwei. Sigh, even through the screen, I can feel the host's resentment rising to the sky. The two strategists were cruel enough to make someone who couldn't sit still obediently stay in the middle of the army. It was like me locking up my husky and not taking it for a walk. Sure, Yuka. Ha ha ha, that's a metaphor. You're really ruthless. Huskies are so cute. Why do you treat them so cruelly? Durian Cake. Husky, his nickname is gone. This was so fitting with the host's image. The two strategists must not let the host succeed. Once she was released into the battlefield, who knew if they would be able to catch her again? Once he was soft-hearted, there would be countless times in the future. Jiang Pengji's fan group was given the nickname Husky, after the nickname Jiang Bapi. But thinking about it carefully, there was nothing wrong with this nickname. Both of them liked to play around. The pitiful Jiang Pengji could not enter the battlefield. The people on the battlefield kept chasing after the Tsing-Yi army for military merits. Because of the Tsing-Yi army's rampage and cruelty, the people of Chang'an district who could leave had all left. Those who could not leave were the old, the weak, the sick and the disabled. A small number of people could not survive the bitter cold last year. When they were discovered one morning, they had already become cold and stiff corpses. The people who survived the winter still had to endure the threat of hunger and the harsh treatment of the Tsing-Yi army. Their lives were extremely difficult. If it was not necessary, these people would not easily open their doors. Therefore, when Jiang Pengji's troops attacked Chang'an district, the doors of the houses on the streets were tightly shut. Some houses had collapsed during the earthquake in Shangjing. No one repaired them. The entire street was deserted. Not only there, but other places as well. The entire Chang'an district was like a dead city. It made people feel cold. Of course, this was the best situation for the troops. Why? Because there were military orders in the military camp. Every soldier had to memorize them by heart and recite them fluently. Among them, there was a ban that said, all soldiers are not allowed to disturb the people, plunder the people, rob the people, or kill the innocent when attacking the city. There were hundreds of them. According to the content of the ban, there were different degrees of punishment after violating it. Although there were special ways to deal with it during special times, it also gave people the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. It would be difficult to deal with if things got out of hand. Now that the streets in the city were quiet, it was very convenient for the troops. Very soon, they pushed into the inner city and killed the Tsing-Yi army who were living a drunken life. Many of them were still intoxicated by their gentleness. Before they could react, they had already fallen to the ground. The Tsing-Yi army liked to enjoy themselves. They burned, killed, and looted many times. If that was all, it would be fine. They even forcibly recruited prostitutes in the camp. They let women from good families enter the brothel to serve the Tsing-Yi army. This brothel was set up in the inner city. When the troops broke into the place, they were immediately stunned by the scene inside. The brothel in front of them was made up of more than 10 rows of small thatched huts. There were more than 20 thatched huts in a row. Each thatched hut was independent. A naked woman was tied to each hut. A thick hemp rope was tied around their necks. In another corner, there were dirty plates. Mosquitoes and flies were hovering above the plates. Most of the women were curled up in the corner of the thatched hut, like dogs in a kennel. Jiang Nongqin's cold and hoarse voice carried a chilling anger. All male soldiers leave. Those who disobey will be punished for violating the ban. As soon as she finished speaking, more than 10 blood-stained female soldiers quickly took over the brothel. Each of them held a long spear in their hands. Their expressions were cold. They cleaned up the drunken members of the Tsing-Yi army. They mercilessly threw their corpses aside and chased away their male comrades. It was not that Jiang Nongqin did not trust her comrades. She just did not trust the men. Some of the soldiers were indeed infuriated by the women's bodies. However, the flames of war had not been extinguished. There were also female soldiers eyeing them covetously at the side. The commandant of the female battalion, Jiang Nongqin, was still holding the fort. Everyone shuddered at the thought of the ban in the military camp. They were no longer charming. At that moment, a shout that sounded like a pig being slaughtered caught everyone's attention. An extremely tall and strong man came out of a thatched hut. There were more than 10 heads of the Xueqi army on his waist. They were tied together with a string of things and piled up together. The sight of them made one's scalp tingle. Not only that, everyone also noticed that his palm, which was as big as a cattail leaf fan, seemed to be grabbing something. Everyone stretched their necks to take a closer look. It turned out to be a soldier who had taken off his pants, revealing his penis. Jiang Nongqin's face darkened. The strong man threw the soldier out like he was throwing trash. The soldier's body rolled on the ground a few times before he stopped. He felt that all the bones in his body were about to be broken. This person has committed the felony of adultery. He should be beaten to death in front of the entire army, the strong man said in a deep voice. Jiang Nongqin clenched the knife on her waist tightly. If not for the military order, she really wanted to hack the soldier to death. I didn't. Chapter 509. Jiang Nongqin sneered and glanced at the filth below him. No. Who would believe that? The soldier reacted to her glare. His little brother seemed to raise its head. He was about to enjoy the beauty and did not expect the strong man to come in. He was shocked. Not only did the strong man come in, but the strong man even pulled him down from the beauty. He was so scared that he shriveled. Really didn't. The soldier glanced at his little brother in embarrassment and hurriedly pulled up his pants that had fallen to his calf. Then he said, "It's obvious that this fool deliberately framed me. I know that it's forbidden by the military order. Why would I do such a thing?" The soldier spoke confidently, but the marks on his body were obviously wrong. Jiang Nongqin shifted her gaze to the strong man and questioned him with her eyes. The strong man pulled a long face and said embarrassedly, "This person did violate the military order. However, the person in the house is not a woman, but a man." The soldier heard this and immediately became confident. He said, "Officer Jiang, did you hear that? I really didn't violate the military order." Jiang Nongqin sneered and walked forward quickly. She lifted her leg and kicked the soldier's face, pressing him to the ground. "Arrest him. He violated the military order. We'll wait for the Lord's decision after the war." Hearing this, the soldier showed a desperate expression and could not help but cry out. He did not do anything to the women here. He just saw a good-looking man and could not help it. Was this considered a violation of the military order? Jiang Nongqin looked down and there was a penetrating chill in her eyes. The military order states that one must not rape the people. What are the people? Do you think that only women are the people and men are not? You still don't repent for violating the military order and still want to argue. Drag him out. 2 female soldiers stepped forward. The soldier still wanted to struggle and resist. It was at this moment that he felt a sharp pain coming from his shoulders. His arms felt like they were broken, and he lost control and feeling. He couldn't even move his fingers, let alone struggle with his hands. His lower jaw was dislocated by one of them. Jiang Nongqin looked at him in disgust. Drag him out. She was in a bad mood when she encountered such a thing. However, she secretly nodded at the 2 female soldiers' skillful methods. Although they were still a little immature, they didn't have much strength in their hands. It was already pretty good that they could do this. The soldier who made a mistake was dragged away like a piece of trash. Jiang Nongqin finally had the time to look up at the burly man who caught the soldier. "What's your name?" Her gaze was focused on the head hanging on the man's shoulder and waist, and she frowned. "I am Dian Yen, a recruit from the 3rd Battalion." The burly man lowered his head in a respectful manner. However, he was much taller than Jiang Nongqin, so he looked like he was looking down at her. Dian Yen? This name was somewhat familiar. Jiang Nongqin thought about it and finally remembered who Dian Yen was. Li Yun was particularly concerned about this new recruit called Dian Yen. She asked him about it out of curiosity, and he said that he was the person the Lord wanted. According to Zhang Pengji's instructions, Dian Yen was supposed to be transferred to her side after the first phase of the recruit camp training ended. However, the moment the recruit camp training ended, Xiangyang district entered a state of preparation for war. Li Yun transferred Dian Yen to the 3rd Battalion to give him a chance to render meritorious service. But isn't this person too honest? Even if it was Jiang Nongqin, looking at the pile of heads hanging on his back and waist, she couldn't help but feel her scalp tingle. Jiang Nongqin said, "You don't have to chop off all the heads. The Lord doesn't like such a rough method. War was war, but there was no need to deliberately torment the enemy's corpses. Firstly, there was no time, and secondly, it was a pain in the ass." Dian Yen said in a tiger's voice, "Didn't you say that the reward is based on the number of heads?" Jiang Nongqin laughed involuntarily and said, "In ancient times, there was a famous general who could kill 1,000 people in one battle. But military merits aren't just based on the number of heads. If that's the case, what if the soldiers behead innocent people to make up the numbers to fool others?" Dian Yen couldn't answer her. He just thought that was how it was said, and it was done in real battles. Dian Yen thought for a moment. He removed the string of heads and threw them on the ground. One by one, the heads fell to the ground with a dull thud. Yet, his expression remained the same. This caused many of the female soldiers to feel a chill in their hearts. They wished they could stay a little further away from this terrifying burly man. He ran around with so many heads hanging on his neck. Wasn't he afraid? The facts proved that Dian Yen was really not afraid, especially when the heads came from the Tsing-Yi army. He only felt that his anger had been vented. "Yes, I understand," Jiang Nongqin said. "Now this place has been sealed off by the women's camp. Men are not allowed to enter. You can go out now. As for the heads on the ground, no one can erase your merit as a brave man who is not afraid of danger. I will mention you in front of the Lord." Dian Yen didn't need to do that, but since the captain had spoken, he accepted it. Ever since that unknown female soldier overturned the whole new camp, Dian Yen, who never looked down on women, dared not look down on them. Just like the captain just now, even someone like Dian Yen felt a chill from the bottom of his bones when he was stared at by the other party. It was a very subtle aura, commonly known as a murderous aura. Bystanders couldn't feel it, but martial artists practiced martial arts, so their senses were far sharper than ordinary people. That captain was probably a person who killed indiscriminately and had countless blood debts on his hands. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to train such a strong murderous aura. The Tsing-Yi army was defeated, and Jiang Pengji's soldiers took the opportunity to expand their victory. Those from the Tsing-Yi army who could be held captive were captured. Those who could not be held captive were killed. Those who disobeyed the orders of the military camp were arrested on the spot. Wei Ci thought that it would take at least a day to conquer Chungan district. In reality, it didn't take that long, it was only half a day. The situation in the city was already under control. 9 leaders of the Tsing-Yi army were arrested. According to their confessions, another 12 people escaped. Meng Hun and the rest had already sent troops to chase after them. Jiang Pengji rode white into the city. The streets and alleys were still tightly shut, but her perception was very strong. She was very clear about how many pairs of eyes were secretly observing from the surrounding houses. She didn't care. Anyway, Chungan district had been conquered. It was hers. Accustomed to the cleanliness and prosperity of Xiangyang district, the audience in the streaming room felt an indescribable discomfort when they saw Chungan district. The contrast between the two was like the difference between a first-tier city and a small village deep in the mountains. However, according to the previous streaming content, Chungan district was the most prosperous place in Fengyi County. How many captives were captured? Jiang Pengji was welcomed into the district headquarters of Chungan district. The inside had been roughly tidied up, but there were still faint black bloodstains on the ground. Upon a closer look, one could even see broken limbs and bones. She sat upright as if nothing had happened. Other than the Tsing-Yi army who were killed and those who escaped from the other side of the city gate, the total number of captives is about 1,800. 1,800. Jiang Pengji's current army had a total of nearly 10,000 people. It would be a huge expense to feed these captives. Wei Ci asked, "How does my lord intend to deal with these?" Chapter 5:10. Wei Ci muttered, "That's a good idea, but the Tsing-Yi army claims to have 200,000 members. There will definitely be more captives in the future. Could it be that the Lord intends to throw all the captives into the mines? Even if the iron mine is rich, it won't last long. Once the number of captives exceeded a certain threshold, it would become a huge hidden danger. Being a mine laborer was bound to be tough. If they were to mine for a lifetime, it was hard to guarantee that the captives would not think of ways to unite and cause trouble. There could not be fewer captives. Many manual labor required captives, but there could not be too many. If there were too many captives, they would be shooting themselves in the foot. If they wanted to have a good reputation and become a truly benevolent ruler, they even had to think of a way to properly arrange their future. Xueqi hoped that his lord could not only do a good deed, but also gain a good reputation. She did not want to be at a disadvantage like before. He would not act smart and make a decision for her. Firstly, he had no intention of doing so. Secondly, Her Majesty was not the type to be controlled by others. Once or twice, she could accept his kindness with a smile and not bicker with him. But if he made his own decisions too many times, she couldn't tolerate that person. Therefore, Xueqi only brought up this point. As for how to make the decision, it was entirely up to her. Even if he did not say it, she would realize this when the number of captives in the camp increased in the future. Zhang Pengji thought about it and said, Zixiao's concern is not unreasonable. We can't let all the defeated troops become captives in the future. If one thought about it carefully, Zhang Pengji's words were quite arrogant. She had just conquered Xiangyang district and Cheng'an district, and she had already determined that she was the ruler of the world. Was this not considered arrogant? Let's do it this way. These captives will be sent to mine for half a year. If they perform well and have no other misdeeds, they can be given a chance to redeem themselves. The captives were considered slaves. Even if they did not have an official household registration, they were still considered her personal property. These captives wanted to regain their freedom? Sure, they just had to think of a way to redeem themselves. Xueqi frowned and asked, Redeem themselves? How do I redeem them? Zhang Pengji said, These captives of the Xueqi army are different from the batch of captives half a year ago. Their style and behavior are very bad. If they are not properly trained, they can only be regarded as scum. They are not useful at all. It's better to let them mine for half a year and calm down. Of course, during this period, these captives were still slaves. They haven't caused any trouble in the past half a year, and their performance has been very good. Then give them a chance. They will temporarily be stationed as civilian soldiers and receive simple training. They will spend most of their time reclaiming the wasteland and plowing the fields. During the slack season, they could participate in other labor projects and would be given food or money according to the amount of work they did. If they can contribute to our army, we will remove their slave status and restore their freedom. Zhang Pengji was naturally unwilling to keep a group of useless captives. If he squeezed their labor, it would also become a hidden danger. It was better to tighten and loosen them, giving them some sweetness and hope. This was not the final verdict, but it gave everyone a general direction for how to deal with the captives. There were too many abandoned fields in the north. Last year, there was such a huge earthquake. Many fields were uncultivated. Because of the Xueqi army, Cheng'an district missed last year's autumn harvest and this year's spring plowing. This meant that there was almost no harvest for 2 years. There were many fields but little food. Who knew how many people were still suffering from hunger? Zhang Pengji had a lot of points of popularity at the moment. She could create a lot of food, but she did not rely on this channel. A normal and healthy force should be self-sufficient and even have abundant food. Not only could it feed the people, but it could also have enough money and food to fight a war. Although it was easy to exchange for food in the mall, without a complete food production system, they would starve to death without the system. Don't forget, she only imprisoned the subsystem. The main body was still hidden in the corner of this world. Not only that, according to her probing of the system a few times, the points of popularity should have other uses. Due to these considerations, Zhang Pengji felt that these captives should work hard to shine and not be idle. Xueqi pondered for a while. He was quite moved by Zhang Pengji's suggestion. She gave the slaves a chance to redeem themselves, but she did not seal off all their escape routes. If these captives were motivated and repentant, and performed well for half a year, they could be stationed as civilian soldiers and plowed the fields for the army. The autumn harvest's food would be distributed between the government and the people. As for the ratio between the two, Zhang Pengji would not be too harsh. If the farming tools, seeds, and cattle were provided by the government would take 40% and the people would get 60%. If the farming tools, seeds, and cattle were provided by each household, the government would take 30% and the people would get 70%. The fields would be owned by the government. During the slack season, the soldiers would be sent to be instructors to teach them how to fight and kill the enemy. They also had the opportunity to go to the battlefield. If they could make contributions, they could even be freed from slavery according to their contributions. If these people did not have such intentions and only wanted to be ordinary people, they could take part in other paid jobs during the slack season. If they worked for a few years, they could even buy their own fields. The government would take 10% and the people would get 90%. Jiang Pengji shared her thoughts with the two strategists. The more she spoke, the more ideas she had. Her thinking became more active. Her soldiers also had the habit of working during the autumn harvest and spring plowing. Last year, Xiangyang district reclaimed too much wasteland. Each household was allocated a lot of fields. They could not keep up with the work. The spring plowing was so short. It would be a pity to miss it. If God was kind this year, the autumn harvest's food could not only feed her army, but also feed the entire Xiangyang district. There would still be a surplus. However, her soldiers were mainly trained. Farming and other labor were auxiliary. The civilian soldiers were mainly farmed and worked as laborers. Training was secondary. Even if their combat qualities were not high, they were still better than ordinary people. However, Xueqi frowned and asked, "This distribution ratio seems to be too lenient." The government provided the farming tools, seeds, and cattle. No matter what, the profits should be 50% and not 40%. After all, the fields did not belong to the people. They did not have to pay for renting the fields. According to the Lord, the grain collected by the government included the grain tax. In this way, the ratio was much lower than the grain tax today. You can't calculate it this way. It's not much if you really calculate it. Xueqi could see the situation clearly. I guess the Lord doesn't plan to pay the civilian soldiers? Even if she does, I think it will be much lower than our soldiers. The grain distributed to the civilian soldiers was indeed theirs. It was for their own consumption. The government did not pay them. If war came and the enemy attacked, they would have to take up arms to defend. In other words, it was equivalent to them farming, raising themselves, paying themselves, and going to the battlefield to fight. In Xueqi's memory of the Golden Age, the current tax ratio was a little harsh. However, the most attractive thing about it was that the impoverished captives had the opportunity to buy their own land after some hard work. They would take 1/10 of the grain tax, which was what Jiang Pengji had mentioned earlier. The government would take 10% of the grain tax and the people would get 90% of the grain tax. Chapter 5:11. Xueqi looked at his lord and sighed with emotion. In his previous life, the Lord was best at war. Whoever provoked her, she would fight back even if she had to fight with everything she had. But now, the Lord seemed to be even better at painting a big picture. Her ability to pacify people's hearts was even better. If the Lord in the past could be so shrewd, why did she have to be like that? First, she used household registration and marriage to stabilize the hearts of the women in the female camp, slightly reversing the prejudice of the people in Xiangyang district against the female camp, and stimulating the female soldiers' desire to fight for fame and fortune. Now, she came up with this method of farming to appease the captives and stabilize the hearts of the people in the rear, so that they would work for her wholeheartedly. The household registration of the female soldiers and marriage after retirement were not in sight yet, but everyone in the female camp was fighting to go to the battlefield. According to Meng Hun of the Vanguard Battalion, these female soldiers were incredible. They were so ruthless in killing that even the men could not help but tremble. Similarly, the method of farming was only a verbal plan. The captives needed to be mining observation period for half a year. Then they had to cultivate wastelands for the government. After the cultivation, they had to work in the fields and participate in other manual labor. Finally, they had to pay a high grain tax. Based on this analysis, it seemed that the captives were at a disadvantage. But Xueqi dared to guarantee with his head that if this plan was spread, they would not have to worry about the captives rioting or taking the opportunity to rebel. The captives would only work hard for the 1 in 10 grain tax and be deeply grateful to the Lord. His lord's painting skills were getting better and better. Xueqi complained that Jiang Pengji loved to paint big pies, but he also knew that the pies she painted could be eaten in the end. What do you think of this idea? Jiang Pengji spoke until her mouth was dry. She raised her hand to untie the water pouch at her waist and gulped down 2 mouthfuls. Xueqi pondered for a while. He was born a commoner, so his heart was naturally more biased towards the interests of the people. However, he was also Jiang Pengji's strategist. He had to always put her interests as the first standard. His lord had already spoken about the well-being of the people. Under such circumstances, Xueqi naturally would not propose to increase the proportion of grain harvests. He praised sincerely, "This is a very good plan. It can definitely restore the livelihood of the people in a short time. My lord is very kind." Dongqing has been plagued by natural disasters in recent years. Last year, there was an earthquake, and there was an extreme shortage of food. In addition, the Red Lotus Group and the Tsing-Yi army were in a frenzy of fighting, causing the agriculture in the north of Dongqing to be greatly damaged. The people's livelihood was poor, and the people did not have enough to eat. Sometimes, they would exchange their children for food. If Jiang Pengji's method of stationing fields was implemented, not only could the people's livelihood be restored in a short period of time, but the people who had lost their land could also return to the fields to work. They could also hoard a large amount of military rations, and they would no longer have to worry about not having enough rations during the war. This was just one of the benefits. Another benefit was the effect of the army farming law. It could attract a large number of refugees who could no longer survive. In troubled times, the people in the territory were the capital. With a large population, would they have to worry about not being able to recruit enough soldiers? Xueqi and Wei Ci were both far-sighted people. They not only saw the benefits in front of them, but also the benefits in the future. Not only were the two strategists deep in thought to further perfect the method that their lord had come up with on the spur of the moment, the audience in the live stream was also discussing endlessly. Dijio Nongcai, "You shallow people, you only love other people's faces, but I'm different from you. I only love the streamer's talent. Every time she seriously thinks and solves a difficult problem, that look is so handsome that I can't close my legs. Choyue Chopiao. The person above, don't interrupt me. Even a love-struck fool has to choose the right time." Why does the army farming law that the streamer mentioned sound so familiar? It feels like it was Boss Chow's subordinates, Zhao Ji and Han Hao, who suggested Boss Chow to set up this army farming law. Nyang eunuch Zhongma. The person above, you're right, but the two seem to be very different, right? Tumi Dalao. I checked on Baidu, it's really different, right? Boss Chow's army farming law greatly restricted the freedom of the farmers. They were almost bound to the land, and their lives were very hard. The government collected a ratio of either 50% or 60%. In the later period, the exploitation was very serious, reaching a ratio of 80% to 20%. The farmers rebelled and fled. Later on, the land was heavily invaded, and the army farming law was basically abolished. Shizhua Xinghuang. How should I say this? After reading the information on Baidu, I only have one thought. Leave a way out in life, so that we can meet again in the future. Even if the farmers were just captives, refugees or slaves, they couldn't be 100% cut off from their livelihood. The tolerance of the people in ancient times was beyond imagination. As long as they weren't forced to the point where they couldn't live, they wouldn't resist at all. They would only choose to accept adversity. Yewu Yenling. That's why I said that the streamer's ability to trick people is really strong, and it's worth learning. She asked them to reclaim the ownerless land, provided some small things during the reclamation, and waited for them to harvest a big share of the profits. The people were still grateful to her. Sui Feng Xiaosa. It's not a trick, is it? For this chaotic world, the streamer is already considered a very good person. Jiang Pengji frowned, and her gaze drifted past the words exploitation in the later period. The farmers rebelled and fled, and land invasion. At that moment, a viewer asked her, Yunshu Dabaobeo, why did the streamer suddenly think of this? Jiang Pengji thought about it and shared her thoughts. Streamer V. My troops will help the people farm when they are busy with the spring plowing and autumn harvest. This can be considered an inspiration. In addition, there are many records of farming in the book given by Mr. Cheng Cheng, but the scale is very small, so farming in the field is not well known. To the common people of ancient times, the method of farming that she spoke of was perhaps astonishing. But according to Jiang Pengji's thinking, this suggestion was logical. As Wei Ci said, no matter how rich the iron mine was, it would be dug out one day. How would the captives be settled then? There would be more and more captives in the future. Would they all be thrown into the mines? Regardless of whether they were captives or ordinary people, they were all on the same side to her. She had the obligation to take care of these people. Jiang Pengji's taking care of them was not to prepare food and resources and let them stay at home to eat and drink and wait for death. Her taking care of them was to exploit the labor force of the person to the greatest extent and develop their ability to contribute to society so that they could support themselves. If the person was useless, Jiang Pengji would give up on such a person. This was the same as what Jiang Nongqin had said before. Those who were willing to save themselves could be saved, but those who were unwilling to save themselves were hopeless. From another perspective, this could be considered as an alternative interpretation of teaching a man to fish was better than teaching a man to fish. If the captives had nothing else to do, they would help the army to open up wastelands and learn how to grow food. In Jiang Pengji's previous life, the Federation pursued the idea that every citizen was a soldier. Every citizen had a certain amount of combat power. Similarly, she hoped that her people were as valiant as them. They did not need to have high combat power, but they must be able to fight. From this, it could be seen that they should learn how to fight when they were idle. When the above ideas were put together, the embryonic form of the farming method could basically be formed. Chapter 5:12. Jiang Pengji looked around and her gaze fell on Qiguanrang, who was sitting in the corner. He was still holding the feather fan that never left his hand. He squinted his eyes slightly, as if he was listening attentively, but also as if he was daydreaming. Jiang Pengji directly called him out. She asked, "What do you think of this method, Wenjing?" From the day Jiang Pengji met Qiguanrang, she knew of his bad habits. If it was not necessary, he would never stand out. He would even deliberately reduce his presence. TSK. Did this guy cherish his life too much? Was he afraid that he would be killed if he performed too well? Qiguanrang naturally did not get distracted. On the contrary, he listened very seriously. He even carefully considered the pros and cons of the method. Obviously, the implementation of this method today definitely had more pros than cons. However, after a long time, it was hard to say. The land belonged to the government, and the proportion of taxes was completely decided by Jiang Pengji alone. To put it blasphemously, if she was no longer in this world, and her successor had a bad temperament, what if he recklessly increased the proportion of taxes? This was one of the reasons. The other was the aristocratic families. They had absolute wealth and power. Even if the people found a way to buy their own land, could they keep this family business? Not to mention the distant past, now that Dongqing's land annexation was serious, how many people sold their land under the coercion of others and became tenant farmers? A bloody lesson was in front of them. However, even though he thought of this, Qiguanrang did not want to bring it up at this time. Because there was not much meaning in bringing it up. The Lord needed to become stronger in a short period of time. The people also needed to recover from the heavy blows as soon as possible and live a stable and prosperous life. The drawbacks of the method would only be revealed in the later stages. He had not even learned to crawl. What was the point of thinking about things after running? Jiang Pengji did not give him the opportunity. She said, "If you have anything on your mind, just say it. I won't laugh at you. You don't have to hide it from me. Just say whatever you have on your mind. If you can't come up with anything, don't even think about taking a break when you go back." The corners of Qiguanrang's mouth twitched slightly. After a while, he spoke of his previous thoughts. After a while he said shyly, "I'm just worrying for nothing. Given the current situation, the Lord's army farming method is the best." Jiang Pengji relaxed her brows and said, "You're not worrying for nothing. The biggest difference between taking precautions and worrying for nothing is that the former may happen in a short period of time, while the latter will only happen in the distant future, or even impossible. In at most a decade or two, she could turn the entire era upside down, so Qiguanrang's worries were not wrong. "I'll remember what you said." After Jiang Pengji finished speaking, she turned to Wei Ci and Xueqi and said, "We'll stop here for now. Go back and sort things out. After this battle, we'll make some adjustments according to the actual situation." Jiang Pengji knew that the best might not be the most suitable. Only those that fit this era would be the most suitable. Wei Ci and Xueqi bowed and said, "Yes." After a while, the guard reported that Jiang Nongqin, the commandant of the female battalion, had requested to see him. Under the leadership of Meng Hun and Li Yun, the vanguard battalion was wiping out the remnants of the Xueqi army. What was Jiang Nongqin doing here now? Jiang Pengji frowned and allowed her to enter. Jiang Nongqin greets the Lord. After Jiang Nongqin entered, she solemnly bowed and found a place to sit after getting permission. Jiang Pengji asked, "Nongqin, what happened?" She reported in a low voice, "I've cleaned up the military discipline and caught 32 people who broke the rules. Among them, there's a person who committed a serious crime." Jiang Pengji was very strict with military discipline. Considering their physiological needs, she did not restrict the male soldiers from getting married. Secondly, she did not restrict them from seeking pleasure during their break. She had already done so. If the soldiers committed a serious crime during the war, she would definitely not let them off lightly. Hearing Jiang Nongqin's words, her voice became cold. "You can deal with the remaining 31 people according to the military rules. Only this person who committed a serious crime, what did he do wrong?" Jiang Nongqin said, "The crime of adultery. The Lord once said that the soldiers are not allowed to adulterate the people. Otherwise, they will be punished with a serious crime." Jiang Pengji's good mood instantly disappeared. Her lips curled into a cold smile that was filled with murderous intent. "The crime of adultery?" she said. "For such a serious crime, you can just order the whole army to watch and beat him to death." Listening to the conversation between the two, the 3 strategists present secretly frowned. The crime of adultery? According to the circumstances of the crime, it would be at least a death sentence. This kind of death was neat and tidy. The most serious way to die was to live a life worse than death. It was really a torture. Which soldier was so blind to commit a crime against the law? Jiang Nongqin said, "I agree with you. However, the person who this person violated is a little special. I don't know how the crime should be measured." Jiang Pengji frowned. Special identity? Could it be that the soldier did something to a troublesome big shot? Jiang Nongqin said, "It was a man." Everyone was stunned for a moment. The soldier was indeed a man. That was not right. Could it be that the person who committed the crime was from the female battalion? Forgive them for being a group of country bumpkins from the countryside. When the crime of adultery was mentioned, their first impression was that it was a man and a woman. If the victim was a man, the person who committed the crime should be from the female battalion. However, this did not make sense. Jiang Nongqin did not know how big of a misunderstanding she had caused. She repeated, "That soldier was from the 3rd Battalion. The person he injured was a man who was captured by the Xueqi army and sent to the brothel. He had a pretty face and seemed to be no different from a woman. My lord once said that the soldiers must not commit adultery to the people. That man was naturally counted as a person." Therefore, Nongqin thought that the crime of adultery could be established. Their worldview was shattered. Wei Ci, Qiguanrang, and Xueqi were dumbfounded. They looked at Jiang Nongqin as if she was a monster. They felt that they had opened the door to a new world. So it could be played that way? Xueqi said embarrassedly, "My lord, this is a little too absurd." Jiang Pengji glanced at Xueqi, then secretly glanced at Wei Ci. Speaking of which, this person's appearance was also very dangerous. It was more reassuring to send someone who could fight and was loyal to protect him. As a good lord who loved her subordinates, she gave herself a thumbs up. Jiang Pengji lowered her eyelids and said, "Nongqin is right. A person is a person. Why does it matter about gender?" Xueqi did not speak. Although he was a little shocked, his lord's words made sense. Just because the victim was a man and he was forced to have sex with someone, it could not be considered a crime. The soldier had indeed committed a serious crime. He realized that this was an opportunity to punish a person as an example to others. He could beat those who wanted to play word games and exploit loopholes in the language. Men were also a person. If his lord did not implement this rule, it would be lively in the future. Nowadays, men were in vogue. Becoming brothers could still be considered a beautiful story. Chapter 5:13. Such a bad precedent could not be allowed to be set. After figuring out the key points, the strategists remained silent and tacitly agreed to Jiang Pengji's punishment for the soldier who committed the crime. Jiang Pengji said seriously, "He will be punished according to the military law. The whole army will watch the punishment. He will be beaten to death on the spot." Jiang Nongqin bowed and said solemnly, "My lord is open-minded. I will obey your orders." The audience in the streaming room who was watching the whole process exploded. They really did not expect the matter to be settled just like that. Yanji Niao. What the F***ck did I hear wrongly? The male soldier's crime has been established? Xueqi Shangtian Tiantai. Someone who studies law, what kind of crime is this in our country? Bao Bao Longation. Do you need me to explain to you the crime of rape in our country? The crime of rape refers to the act of using violence, coercion, or other means against the will of a woman to have sex with a woman, or to have sex with a girl under the age of 14 intentionally. This is the accurate definition of rape in our country's criminal law. Do you understand? Bao Bao Yiliankan. I understand. In other words, is it not a crime of rape for a woman to have sex with a man or a man to have sex with a man? Bao Bao Shashan Li. In theory, it is, but it is still a crime. It is just not a crime of rape. Mama, as a man with a handsome face, I suddenly feel that our country is very dangerous. Can I apply to migrate to Mars? Bao Bao Wangji Emo. Streamer, I feel that you can really go to heaven. When the female soldiers in your female battalion grow stronger, maybe you can consider setting up a men's protection association. After all, your female soldiers are very scary. If there is domestic violence, what will happen to the weak men and women? Bao Bao Lu Zhanxian. By the way, am I really watching the streaming room in ancient times? The streamer subordinates are very receptive. Zhang Pengji laughed involuntarily. It was not that they were receptive, it was obviously to prevent any loopholes in the language. Nowadays, men were prevalent in the world. The soldiers were ordered not to lay hands on civilian women. In order to vent their lust, they might lay hands on civilian men. Now there were signs. If they did not restrain themselves, it would be difficult to recruit soldiers in the future. Who would dare to come? Wei Ci and the others were only preventing people from taking advantage of loopholes and destroying the atmosphere. It was not to protect men's rights. They considered things with their own thinking, which was very different from the viewers in the streaming room. At that moment, Jiang Nongqin straightened her body and asked Jiang Pengji after some deliberation. Does the Lord still remember a recruit named Dian Yan? Dian Yan? Everyone present was no stranger to this name. After all, Dian Yan was either staying in the military camp or temporarily staying at Wei Ci's house. Jiang Pengji said, "Of course I remember. I even told Han Mei that if Dian Yan completes his recruit training, he can be transferred to my side." After Wei Ci heard this, he secretly glanced at his lord and sighed to himself that the fate between his lord and Dian Yan was indeed destined. "What's the matter with the recruit?" she asked. Jiang Nongqin told him what she saw. She said, "The soldier who committed a serious crime was caught by this person. When I saw him, I saw dozens of human heads hanging on his shoulders and waist. He was very brave. I think this person is a promising talent." Jiang Pengji's fingers tapped on the table. She originally wanted to wait for Dian Yan's training to end before transferring him to her side and nurturing him. This person was born to be a general. If he was properly nurtured, he would definitely become a talent. Now that he had made a name for himself on the battlefield, it was indeed time to promote him. Thinking of this, Jiang Pengji said, "I'll remember this." Conquering Chang'an district required people everywhere. Dian Yan came forward himself. If she did not get a strong man to work for him, it would be a disgrace to her nickname of Jiang Buppy. Although there was a general idea of the army farming strategy, it was not easy to carry it out. Jiang Pengji planned to throw this matter to Li Yun, Dian Yan, and Su Ku. Li Yun had experience in reclaiming wasteland and was more familiar with farming. Dian Yan and Su Ku assisted him. While they were discussing, the sound of powerful footsteps came from outside the door. Jiang Pengji knew who they were. Wasn't it Meng Hun and Li Yun? "My lord, I have failed in my mission. I did not capture all the leaders of the Tsing-Yi army who escaped." Meng Hun apologized. Li Yun also looked ashamed. They sent people to chase after them, but they were not as familiar with the terrain as the Tsing-Yi army. Many of the leaders escaped. Wei Ci glanced at Jiang Pengji. Her expression was very calm. He could not tell whether she was happy or angry. He asked Meng Hun, "Officer Meng, do you know which direction those thieves ran to?" Meng Hun thought for a while and said, "It should be the southwest." "The southwest?" Wei Ci frowned. Xueqi and Qiguanrang's expressions changed slightly. It seems that we won't be able to rest for a while. The southwest was Maolin district, which was also the territory of the Tsing-Yi army. Now that they had taken over Chungan district and Xiangyang district, it was equivalent to the two districts separating Maolin district in the southwest and Jiaoping district in the northeast. It made it difficult for the Tsing-Yi army in Fengyi County to look around. They were unable to gather their troops in one place. It was very easy to break through. There were a total of 4 districts in Fengyi County. With Chungan district as the center, Maolin district was in the southwest and Jiaoping district was in the northeast. Xiangyang district, which was owned by Jiang Pengji, bordered these 2 districts. It was located in the southeast of Chungan district. From the map, it directly cut off the Tsing-Yi army in Fengyi County. Regardless of strategy or deployment, the Tsing-Yi army had the motive to attack Chungan district or Xiangyang district. If they attacked Chungan district, it was equivalent to returning to the original state. However, Chungan district had been ravaged by the Tsing-Yi army for a whole winter. There was not much to be gained. Instead of attacking the dilapidated Chungan district, it was better to gather their troops and attack Xiangyang district. Xiangyang district was the largest district among the 4 districts in Fengyi County. Now that Jiang Pengji had governed it in an orderly manner, the people were rich and the products were abundant. How could the Tsing-Yi army not be envious? Taking advantage of the opportunity when the main force was still in Chungan district, it was very likely that they would launch a sneak attack on the weaker Xiangyang district. Xueqi asked, "My lord, are we sending troops back to assist now?" Jiang Pengji suddenly sneered and said, "Why should we send troops back to assist Xiangyang district? We left quite a number of troops there. The siege equipment used for defense is also very sufficient. With Huayu and Luoyue guarding it, what do you think the possibility of losing the city is?" Qiguanrang tapped his feather fan leisurely and said, "My lord, are you thinking of giving them a taste of their own medicine?" Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes. Some malicious glint flashed in her eyes. If Jiaoping district and Maolin district really send troops to attack Xiangyang district, we'll go all the way. We'll directly split up our troops and destroy their lair. Everyone was speechless. "That's amazing, my lord." Wei Ci chuckled helplessly. It seemed that he really could not restrict her from going to the battlefield in the future. Seeing that she had nowhere to vent her anger, the Tsing-Yi army became her punching bag. Her idea was quite good, but it was more conservative. She could only launch a sneak attack on either Jiaoping district or Maolin district. In order not to be obstructed by the strategists, she stubbornly chose to split up her troops to attack the city. The troops would be split into 2. She would lead one group to launch a sneak attack, while the others would go to the other group to launch a sneak attack. Chapter 5:14. As it turned out, Wei Ci knew Jiang Pengji's temper quite well. It was as he had predicted. Send scouts to observe the movements of the Tsing-Yi army in Jiaoping district and Maolin district. Report to me immediately if there are signs of sending troops. Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes. She originally wanted to gradually encroach on the 4 districts of Fengyi County. Step by step, steadily and surely. However, the Tsing-Yi army courted death and gave her such an opportunity. As long as they dared to attack Xiangyang district, she dared to make them lose their nest. Yes. Meng Hun accepted the order. "I will obey." Most of the scouts were in the vanguard battalion. This task naturally fell to him. Xueqi said, "My lord, we don't have enough troops now. If we split our troops to attack Maolin district and Jiaoping district, I'm afraid we won't be able to do it." After he finished speaking, he secretly glanced at Qiguanrang and Wei Ci, hoping that they would come forward to persuade their lord. However, Qiguanrang also liked to take risks. Jiang Pengji's unconventional way of sending troops was more to his liking. As for Wei Ci, he knew that it was not easy to persuade his lord. If he dared to dissuade her this time, she would stir up more trouble next time. If the Tsing-Yi army wanted to attack Xiangyang district, based on the previous battle situation, they would definitely mobilize a lot of manpower. When Jiang Pengji first came to Xiangyang district, the Tsing-Yi army had 10,000 men stationed there. Didn't they still get wiped out by her? Therefore, if they went to Xiangyang district, they would just be sending themselves to die. They were not a threat at all. If they wanted to see the hope of breaking through Xiangyang district, they would have to mobilize most of their troops. The Tsing-Yi army's rear would definitely be weak. It was not impossible to occupy Jiaoping district and Maolin district at the same time, but it required courage and strong judgment. Xueqi saw that they refused to speak and immediately understood their intentions. He could only sigh faintly. He could not do anything alone. It was impossible to change his lord's decision. Zhang Pengji sat on the seat of honor and said, "This matter is temporarily settled. If the Xingyi army in Jiaoping district and Maolin district sends troops, we will send troops to destroy their nest. If they know their place, we will allow them to be free and unfettered for a while." Whether to mobilize troops again depended on the actions of the Xingyi army. Currently, Zhang Pengji was still facing the reconstruction of Chang'an district. Because of the experience of Xiangyang district, it was not difficult to rebuild Chang'an district. However, there were still many problems in front of her. The biggest problem was the people of Chang'an district. Because of the Xingyi army's wanton disturbance, the young people who could escape had already thought of a way to escape. Now, most of the people who remained in the city were old, weak, sick and disabled. Each of them was emaciated and sallow from hunger. Every household's rice jar had no stored food. Even if they had stored food, they did not dare to light a fire to cook. They were afraid that the smoke from the chimney would cause the Xingyi army to plunder. They could only soak the uncooked rice in clear water and soften it slightly before eating it raw. Hearing the news from Xueqi and the others, Zhang Pengji's slightly cheerful mood became heavy. "How many people are there?" Zhang Pengji asked. "It is estimated that there will be no more than 3,000 people," Xueqi replied. What was more serious was that the 2,000 people were physically weak due to the long-term lack of salt intake. Even if Zhang Pengji provided them with food, not many of them could be used as effective labor force. In this way, the situation in Chang'an district was much worse than that in Xiangyang district. Now that they haven't figured out the movements of the Xingyi army in Jiaoping district and Maolin district, they can't easily mobilize their troops, in case they can't return in time to help. Zhang Pengji said, "I'll go and take a look myself." In another place, 31 troops who broke the law were punished. Fortunately, the circumstances were not very serious. They were just taught a harsh lesson. According to the military camp's rules, the only remaining soldier had to be beaten to death in front of at least one battalion of troops to serve as a warning to others. The person who carried out the punishment was Jiang Nongqin. The soldier was tied up and sent to the military training ground that was temporarily cleared. Jiang Nongqin read out the soldier's crime with a cold expression. All the troops were in an uproar. They had only heard that raping a woman was a crime, but they had never heard that raping a man would also be punished according to military law. However, the military law clearly stated that one could not rape a commoner. The victim was a commoner, so naturally, the soldier had broken the military law. Of course, the soldiers didn't say anything about the verdict, but they were still doubtful and opposed it in their hearts. The man was originally a member of the Xingyi army's brothel. Was it considered a violation of military law to touch him? It couldn't be, right? However, they didn't dare to voice out their doubts. Instead, they silently remembered it in their hearts, in case they accidentally stepped on a mine in the future. According to military law, he'll be beaten to death. Jiang Nongqin read out coldly. Execute. There were a total of 4 people executing. 2 female soldiers held the soldier's left and right shoulders to prevent him from moving and escaping. The other 2 female soldiers held rods in their hands and beat him to death. Naturally, the soldier refused to accept his fate. He used all kinds of methods and strength in an attempt to break free. The veins on his face bulged and his face turned red. He looked extremely ferocious, and his eyeballs even looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. The heavy rods carried a huge force and smashed on his body. It was so painful that his internal organs were about to shift positions. However, his mouth was blocked. Even if he had a stomach full of resentment, he couldn't shout out. Very soon, a metallic smell gushed out of his mouth. That day, the wind was not noisy. The military training ground was silent. The soldiers of the entire battalion were ghastly pale. They were so frightened that they didn't even dare to take a deep breath. They watched helplessly as the soldier struggled violently until he was on the verge of death. Finally, he stopped breathing. The area from his back to his buttocks was already rotten, revealing his broken bones. The 4 female soldiers who were executing the execution still looked sullen. They weren't shocked by the scene in front of them at all. Seeing that the soldier had breathed his last, One of them released the hand that was restraining his shoulder. She raised her hand to check his breath and pulse. The female soldier said to Jiang Nongqin, who was watching the execution, "The execution is over. The criminal is dead." Jiang Nongqin waved her hand. "Keep this person's corpse. It's the last mercy." She was punishing the chicken to warn the monkeys and to warn the impetuous soldiers. This was the consequence of violating the military order. Since then, the atmosphere in the military camp was solemn. They were always talking about the military rules, for fear that they would follow in the footsteps of others. Of course, there was another benefit besides that. When the soldiers of the male battalion saw the female soldiers of the female battalion, who dared to flirt with them? When they saw them on the road, their legs turned to jelly. They wished they could walk around them. The food that Jiang Pengji brought was very sufficient. Xueqi and a few others were busy sorting out the paperwork of the district headquarters of Cheng'an district. Meng Hun and a few others led 2 battalions of soldiers to slightly repair the damaged city walls and gates. Jiang Nongqin led the remaining people to set up porridge stalls everywhere. After about 3 or 4 days, a few uninvited guests came to Maolin district and Jiaoping district. "General, our General Tsongtian died tragically. You have to avenge him." After experiencing a life-and-death escape for 3 or 4 days, how could the leaders of the Tsingyi army, who had lived like princes for more than half a year, bear it? Each of them was battered and exhausted. Their clothes were ragged. When they recalled the past few days, they felt that their mouths were full of bitterness. Chapter 5:15. Jiaoping District. "Don't worry. Speak slowly. You're a man. Why are you crying? You're so girly." The leader of the Tsingyi army in Jiaoping district called himself General Ping Tian. He was one of the leaders of the Tsingyi army. When he received a message from a soldier saying that there were companions from Cheng'an district outside the district and they kept repeating the news of General Tsongtian's death, he was horrified. He quickly asked his men to welcome the members of the Tsingyi army. At first glance, they were really General Tsongtian's subordinates. General Ping Tian thought about it and hurriedly asked these people about the details of General Tsongtian's death. Who would have thought that as soon as he opened his mouth, these people were already crying their eyes out. Their faces were smeared with snot and tears. In addition, they hadn't washed themselves for many days, so their faces were stained with something. They looked very dirty and pathetic, and anyone who saw them would feel disgusted. General Tsongtian. General Tsongtian was killed by a group of people. They even snatched Cheng'an district and swaggered in. They drove our brothers out. General Tsongtian died unjustly. The crying leader of the Tsingyi army was the subordinate who had previously flattered General Tsongtian. In order to escape, he could not bear to leave the good days of the Tsingyi army, so he could only seek refuge with his accomplice. "Has Cheng'an district been breached?" Hearing the news, General Ping Tian of Jiaoping district was frightened. He hurriedly asked for details. "Brother, don't cry. Tell me first, which bastard killed Brother Tsongtian? How many people did he bring?" Cheng'an district was very close to Jiaoping district. It would only take a little more than a day to reach there on foot. Since the enemy had conquered Cheng'an district, it was hard to guarantee that they would not target Jiaoping district. If they turned around and waved their troops, he had to at least know the details of the enemy and be mentally prepared. Hearing General Ping Tian's concern, the leaders of the Tsingyi army, who had abandoned General Tsongtian's corpse and fled, cried even more sadly. They held the only emotional card firmly, hoping to get a good position here with the little favor left by General Tsongtian. They miserably described Jiang Pengji and her men as particularly abominable. They tried their best to beautify General Tsongtian's noble image and described how the general sacrificed himself for others to delay the invading army, so that his brothers could have precious time to escape. Hearing these compliments, General Ping Tian secretly curled his lips in disdain. According to his understanding of General Tsongtian, how could he not know his temperament? If he could abandon his subordinates in exchange for his own life, he would definitely do it by hook or by crook. How could he sacrifice himself for others? However, it was not appropriate for him to say this out loud. He also revealed a rather moved and sad expression, matching the other party's acting skills. After a long time, General Ping Tian finally found out who had conquered Cheng'an district. Xiangyang district. This is not easy. That's a tough nut to crack. No one has been able to crack it for half a year. The Tsingyi army only knows how to plunder, How would they know how to build? No matter how good the cards were, when they fell into their hands, they could only play out the worst situation. Chang'an district had been destroyed to such an extent that they were so poor that they couldn't even find a grain of rice. General Ping Tian knew how to restrain himself. He did not drive the people of Jiaoping district to a dead end in one go. However, he still took advantage of them from time to time and plundered them again and again. The people were miserable and there were often people who wanted to escape. General Ping Tian did not know about other things, but he knew that there were no commoners in the district city. There was only the Xueqi army left. In that case, how could he still be considered a general? Therefore, he cracked down on any attempt to escape and captured all the commoners who had escaped. However, life forced the commoners. Even if they risked being killed by the Xueqi army, there were still commoners who tried to escape. In the face of this phenomenon, General Ping Tian was of course so angry that he gritted his teeth. At the same time, he was even more envious of the nearby Xiangyang district. However, the district city was as tough as a tortoise's shell. It was not easy to go anywhere. Hearing that Xiangyang district had taken the initiative to attack Chang'an district, General Ping Tian was extremely flustered. Do you know how many people they brought to Chang'an district? General Ping Tian was secretly anxious. He was afraid that Jiang Pengji's next target would be him. He had not enjoyed the prestige of being a general enough. About 6 or 7,000. Maybe a lot more than that. The leader of the Xueqi army answered cautiously. Of course, he did not know the exact number. He only guessed based on his feelings. How could there be a small number of people if they could conquer Chang'an district so easily? Little did he know that it was precisely his nonsense that made General Ping Tian develop greedy thoughts that he should not have. 6 or 7,000. General Ping Tian asked in surprise. Are you sure there are so many? There should be. There are too many thieves, so I can't distinguish them at the moment. The leader of the Xueqi army secretly pinched the corner of his clothes. He was extremely nervous. 6 or 7,000. The total number of troops in Xiangyang district is less than 10,000. General Ping Tian's heart trembled. A bold idea shrouded his heart. He was so excited that he could not even hold his things steadily. If the people in Xiangyang district really sent 6 or 7,000 troops to attack Chang'an district, it meant that there were at most 3 or 4,000 troops guarding Xiangyang district. It would be a fool's dream if they wanted to defend the huge Xiangyang district with such a small number of troops. Perhaps he could take advantage of it? General Ping Tian was very clear about the situation in Chang'an district. It was a super big mess. It could definitely entangle Jiang Pengji and the others so that they would have no time to take care of the situation in Xiangyang district. In this way, the rear of Xiangyang district would be empty. However, thinking of the losses that the Xueqi army suffered in Xiangyang district last year, General Ping Tian did not dare to let his guard down. If he wanted to conquer the city as soon as possible, he had to have sufficient troops. Taking advantage of the fact that the rear of Xiangyang district was empty and the main force was delayed by Chang'an district, he could take a gamble. Even if those people reacted, Xiangyang district would have already changed hands. When the main force rushed to the city, it would be of no help. Thinking of this, General Ping Tian's heart was burning. Originally, he only wanted to take 60% of the troops to raid Xiangyang district, but now he could not wait to take all the troops away and conquer Xiangyang district as soon as possible. He could not help but think of the shocked and resentful expression of Jiang Pengji's main force. Thinking of this, he comforted General Congtian's old subordinates with a gentle voice. He was in a good mood. Although General Ping Tian looked down on General Congtian's fat body and stupid brain, he also wanted to annex the old subordinates left behind by General Congtian. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. If he could absorb the Xueqi army that was under General Congtian's control, his power could expand again. General Ping Tian asked, apart from you, are there any other brothers who survived? The leader of the Xueqi army answered miserably, only a few hundred brothers were lucky enough to escape. The rest were all killed. Some of them fled to Jiaoping district, while the rest fled to Maolin district. General Ping Tian was shocked. He was afraid that the Xueqi army in Maolin district would also think that Xiangyang district was empty and run to take advantage of the situation. A sense of crisis arose. He patted the shoulder of General Congtian's old subordinate and said indignantly, General Congtian and I were comrades. He was killed by the traitors. How can I not avenge him as a brother? Don't worry. I'll summon the troops and destroy the traitor's lair. Chapter 5:16. Not long after, the scouts who were paying close attention to the activities of the two counties sent news that the two counties were in the midst of organizing their troops. Hearing that, Jiang Pengji smiled slyly and proudly. If she did not make the Tsing-Yi army lose everything, she would write her name backwards. Assemble the troops and count the soldiers, she said. Summon the gentlemen and the lieutenants. Just as Wei Ci thought, Jiang Pengji planned to split her troops into two groups. One group would launch a sneak attack on Jiaoping district while the other group would launch a sneak attack on Maolin district. After conquering the two districts, they would assemble their troops and rush back to Xiangyang district. They would coordinate from the inside and the outside to outflank the Tsing-Yi army's rear. They dared to lay their hands on her property. If she did not teach the Tsing-Yi army a lesson, they would really think that she was a pushover. Jiang Pengji already had a draft in her mind on how to divide the troops. Jiang Pengji planned to leave 1,500 to guard Qingan district. She would lead 1,500 elites to launch a surprise attack on Jiaoping district, and the remaining troops would launch a sneak attack on Maolin district. What they were fighting for now was the time difference. The sooner the better, the higher the chance of victory. Zixiao, you're not feeling well. It's not suitable for you to rush over in a short period of time. You and Officer Meng will lead these 1,500 soldiers to guard Qingan district. The damaged city gate had already been partially repaired, and together with the city defense equipment, it should be able to resist for a period of time. Wan Zheng and I will attack Jiaoping district. Han Mei, Nong Qin, and Xiao Yu will lead the remaining soldiers to attack Maolin district. We must conquer it as soon as possible. Wei Ci secretly cried and laughed. She had indeed chosen Qiguan Rang. Qiguan Rang would not stop her from having fun at all, but he had no choice but to accept the order along with the others. Jiang Pengji said decisively, "We'll set off after nightfall." It was hard to guarantee that no enemy scouts would discover their intentions during the 100-day march, but it was much safer at night. At the same time, far away in Xiangyang district, Feng Jin was still wandering in the sea of documents. Feng Jin's recent daily life could be summed up in 11 words. Very busy, extremely busy, super busy. Everyone's work pressure was piled on him, and he said that he should spend more time with his wife. It was all a lie. How busy were they exactly? Ever since the army set off for war, he had not stepped foot into his house. Currently, there were only 4,000 soldiers left in Xiangyang district. Although it was not considered a shortage, if there was a heavy pressure on the border, these 4,000 people would not be enough. Fortunately, his lord still had some conscience. What conscience? She did not drag Zhang Ping, the treasurer of Xiangyang district, along with her. The carpentry workshop that Zhang Ping was in charge of could produce all kinds of siege and defense weapons. These things could give Xiangyang district more confidence. Under Feng Jin's instructions, Zhang Ping got the woodworking workshop to manufacture all kinds of defensive equipment urgently. He wished he could arm the entire Xiangyang district to the teeth. Of course, from Zhang Ping's point of view, with their current level of equipment, even their teeth were made of cast iron. Feng Jin was so busy that he could not see his wife, but his wife could come and see him. She was even carrying Chongqing, who could speak clearly, in her arms. Daddy, Daddy, hug. When Chongqing saw her father, whom she had not seen for a few days, she excitedly asked for a hug. Feng Jin rubbed his sore eyes to make sure that his ears and eyes were not hallucinating. He really heard his daughter's call and also saw his wife and daughter standing at the entrance of the government office, hesitating and not daring to approach. Seeing that Wei Jingxian was worried, Feng Jin said to her, "Come in, there are no important documents here." He raised his hand to catch his daughter, who had become a ton heavier. Before he could sigh, Chongqing stepped on his thigh and kissed him. "Don't kiss me, don't kiss me. Doesn't this girl find it dirty?" Feng Jin had been staying up late for several days. He slept less than 2 hours every day and was so busy that he did not have the time to wash up. He looked a little embarrassed. His daughter kissed him immediately, afraid that she would get dirty. "Daddy." Chongqing was despised. She tilted her head in confusion. His daughter was still young. Feng Jin did not know how to explain. He could only look at Wei Jingxian for help. His wife was still the best. She understood his predicament and reached out to carry his daughter back. She said gently, "Daddy is tired. Don't disturb him." Chongqing lay in Wei Jingxian's arms. Her big watery eyes were like those of a fawn, which melted people's hearts. "Cool." Chongqing hugged her mother with both arms. Wei Jingxian glanced at the table and was shocked by the pile of documents on it. Why are there so many? Xiangyang district was only a district. Why were there so many documents that needed to be handled? In her impression, the district magistrates were very idle. They were either walking their birds and dogs every day or spending their time in the mountains and rivers. They were so free and unfettered. Her husband only assisted Lanting. When Lanting went to war, her husband temporarily took over the official duties. Why was he so busy? Feng Jin rubbed his eyebrows and said, "After the spring plowing, we still have to collect farm tools and cattle. These things have to be accounted for. Xiangyang district is considered a rare peaceful refuge in the north. Every day, refugees from all over want to enter the city. These people have to be settled. Many wealthy families have migrated here to seek refuge. They want to buy the good houses under the Lord's name. They have to deal with these." Currently, Xiangyang district was still under construction. It was becoming more and more prosperous. Seeing how clean and beautiful the newly built rental houses in the district headquarters were, many locals of Xiangyang district felt uncomfortable. They also wanted to rebuild their houses. However, if they wanted to rebuild, they had to pay for all the materials and labor costs themselves. It was not cheap. That kind of house could not be built with money. They still had to go through the procedures of the district headquarters. They had to approve the kiln to fire this batch of green bricks. They had to confirm the quantity of green bricks before they could start building the houses. In the end, they needed Feng Jin's signature and approval. Otherwise, they couldn't build the houses. Usually, a few people would share the workload. Now that he was the only one left to look after the house, it was naturally very tiring. Apart from these messy matters, there were also the local government affairs of Xiangyang district and various conflicts. They were trivial and troublesome. It was either conflicts about family affairs or disputes about the uneven distribution of land. Feng Jin really wanted to throw these matters to the women's department in the government office. However, the women's department was already crazy busy. As a man, he really couldn't bring himself to make things difficult for a group of young ladies. Wei Jingxian saw that her husband's eyes were bloodshot and his eye bags were dark. Her heart ached a little. She asked, "Are these documents very important?" Feng Jin was startled. His brain, which hadn't slept for a long time, reacted slowly. After a while, he understood the meaning of her words. "It's not important. It's just very trivial," Feng Jin said. Wei Jingxian thought about it. She reached out and took a portion of it. Then, she sorted the various documents according to their importance. Chongqing stayed in her arms and squirmed restlessly. She raised her claws and grabbed her sleeve. She minded her own business and played with it. After eating the milk paste in the afternoon, Chongqing lay on Wei Jingxian's thighs and slept with her limbs spread out. Her fat calves could hook onto the table. She was busy from noon to dusk. Only then did the mountain of bamboo slips slowly decrease. "Thank you, madam." Feng Jin rubbed the space between his eyebrows and smiled at Wei Jingxian. "Let's go home," Wei Jingxian said with a smile. Chapter 517. "Mr. Feng, something bad has happened," Luo Yu said. Feng Jin's heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to carry the sleeping Chongqing, Luo Yu's voice made him stop. "What happened?" "The Tsing-Yi army in Maolin district and Jiaoping district are going to attack us. It's less than half a day's journey." "What?" Feng Jin widened his eyes in shock. Why did the Tsing-Yi army suddenly attack Xiangyang district? The Tsing-Yi army in the two districts are still well behaved. Why did they suddenly attack Xiangyang district? Xiangyang district had sufficient troops and horses. The Tsing-Yi army had tried a few times but failed. Why would they take the initiative to find trouble now? Could it be? Feng Jin's brain started to work again. He quickly figured out the crux of the matter. It was most likely that Chungan district had been conquered. The other two districts thought that Xiangyang district was weak and wanted to take advantage of it. He secretly gritted his teeth. He couldn't continue following a lord who specialized in tricking her subordinates. Wei Jingxian's face paled. "Husband? Were they preparing for another war?" "It's okay. Take Chongqing home first. I can't go back for a few days. When Lanting comes back, I'll make her pay. You can't cheat me like this. He had said that he would stay behind to accompany his wife and child, but in the blink of an eye, he had caused such a huge mess. Feng Jin got up and strode out of the government office. Wei Jingxian let out a long sigh. She lowered her head to look at her daughter, who had just woken up with a start. She felt terrible, but there was nothing she could do. In this chaotic world, it was impossible not to be disturbed by wars. He lowered his head and kissed his daughter's brow. He whispered, Chongqing, let's go home and wait for your father to return. There was still half a day's journey before the arrival of the Xueqi army. Xiangyang district still had plenty of time to prepare. Feng Jin inquired about the number of guards and defensive equipment at each city gate, and his heart calmed down a little. Fortunately, the city defense equipment was ready. If it was a night battle and a sneak attack, the Xueqi army would not be able to return. Feng Jin usually gave people the impression that he was a dignified gentleman. It was rare to see him angry. If people thought that he was a kind person because of this, they would be making a big mistake. Anyone who dared to lay their hands on Xiangyang district, he would make them pay a painful price. He and Luo Yu inspected the city walls, and only after ensuring that there were no problems did they feel relieved to leave the city walls. Feng Jin said in a low voice, the two troops of the Xueqi army are attacking in different directions. According to the scouts' reports, there's a certain difference in the time of arrival. Tell the soldiers on both sides of the city gates to keep a close watch and not let their guard down. We have to hold on for at least 5 days. This is going to be a tough battle. Luo Yu nodded as he listened. He had no objections to Feng Jin's arrangement. After a while, Feng Jin suddenly said, "Oh right, after nightfall, no matter who it is, the city gate must not be opened." Luo Yu's heart tightened. These words had a profound meaning. Could it be? What you mean is that there are spies from the Xueqi army in the city? Luo Yu asked. Feng Jin frowned and said, that's hard to say. After all, when we first entered Xiangyang, we captured many members of the Xueqi army. It's hard to guarantee that the former members of the Xueqi army are not related to those enemies. It's always better to be cautious. Luo Yu looked indifferent on the surface, but he remembered these words in his heart. The current Xiangyang district was a paradise in troubled times that they had poured their blood, sweat, and tears into for half a year. No one was allowed to covet it. Even if he felt that the members of the Xueqi army who had surrendered were completely loyal and would not rebel, nothing was absolute. It was better to be cautious. I understand. I'll definitely pass this message to the guards at each city gate. In order to ensure that the soldiers had sufficient energy, they changed shifts every 2 hours after nightfall to ensure that everyone was full of energy. In the dark night, torches were lit on the city walls of Xiangyang district, like the only light in the world. Jiaoping district was the closest to Xiangyang district. It would only take them a day and a half if they traveled at full speed. It was already late at night when they arrived. One of the minions said, General, it seems that the security in Xiangyang district is quite strict. General Ping Tian rode a tall and strong horse. This time, he brought more than 5,000 members of the Xueqi army with him. Each of them was an elite. Those who stayed in Jiaoping district were old and weak. They were not suitable for long-distance raids. If he brought them along, they would definitely slow down the pace of the army. If it's not strict, why do you think this fat piece of meat hasn't been taken away? General Ping Tian's heart skipped a beat. He said coldly, I've sent people to investigate the situation in Xiangyang district in the past. The guards are 2 to 3 times weaker than they are now. Now that they're so solemn, it's obvious that they're not confident. The more weak they were, the more they had to pretend to be powerful. General Ping Tian was even more confident. The minions flattered him. General is unparalleled in wisdom. No matter how hard Xiangyang district tries to hide, it can't hide from your sharp eyes. General Ping Tian snorted. However, the minions had a sweet tongue, so he flattered him very much. Let's wait a little longer. We'll launch a surprise attack with a rocket at midnight. General Ping Tian was different from the other leaders of the Xueqi army. Not only did he like to plunder money and beauties, but he also liked to organize various weapons. For example, a rocket was an arrow that was pierced with a coarse cloth dyed with oil and then shot out with a bow. Once it pierced into the flesh, The wound would easily fester and become infected. He wanted to launch a surprise attack and catch the other party off guard, but he did not know that Xiangyang district was already prepared. Was it a big deal to have a rocket? The night was dark. Feng Jin seized the opportunity to sleep for a few hours. At midnight, the minions woke him up as ordered. How's the situation at the north and west gates? Are there any signs of the enemy? Feng Jin took the wet cloth from the minions and wiped his face casually. The cold water stains and the night breeze dispelled his remaining sleepiness. He could not help but shiver and his mind was completely awake. The minions replied, "Sir, there are no signs of the enemy at the north and west gates." Feng Jin took a deep breath and said, "Don't let your guard down." Everyone in the Xueqi army had different degrees of night blindness. It was difficult for them to see things at night, but it did not mean that they could not launch a night attack. The torches at the city gates were burning fiercely. They could be seen from afar. It was the best guiding light for the Xueqi army. Many soldiers were also informed that there might be a surprise attack by the enemy tonight. All of them were on high alert. It was late at night. This was the time when the people slept the most. Even the Xueqi army, who was lying in ambush, could not help but rub their eyes. At this moment, a member of the Xueqi army with excellent eyesight saw that the soldiers on the city walls were already yawning sleepily. It seemed that they could not open their eyes. He immediately said to General Ping Tian in surprise, "General, it's almost time." The grass outside the city was lush. It was an excellent cover for the Xueqi army. They slowly approached the city walls. They were less than 300 meters away, but the soldiers on the city walls still did not find any traces of them. General Ping Tian was overjoyed. He ordered, "Launch the rocket." Because the shooting range was not enough, the archers needed to move forward further. Chapter 5:18. The archers of the Xueqi army crouched down and passed through the dense grass. They were getting closer and closer. General Ping Tian's heart was in his throat. The distance between them was gradually shortened for more than 300 meters. 250 meters. 200 meters. 150 meters. After all, ordinary bows and arrows were not improved crossbows. Not everyone could draw a heavy bow with a longer shooting range. It could be said that this archer troop of more than 100 people was General Ping Tian's flesh and blood. He would be heartbroken if even one of them was gone. As they got closer and closer, General Ping Tian felt that the atmosphere was getting more and more solemn. He commanded the Xueqi army to move forward slowly. The night became their best camouflage. The Xiangyang district seemed to be within their reach. Finally, the archers entered the shooting range. One by one, they took out their bows and arrows from the quiver at their waists. The arrowheads had been wrapped in a layer of coarse cloth that was stained with oil. They only needed to use a flint or a match to ignite it, and it would be instantly ignited. It would pierce into one's flesh and cause great damage. The sound of flint rubbing against each other was heard. Some sparks splashed on it and a cluster of flames appeared. General Ping Tian stared fixedly at the soldiers on the city wall. He was still yawning sleepily. At that moment, the archers had already drawn their bows and aimed at them. He shouted in a low voice, "Shoot!" However, a second before the archers released their bowstrings, the soldiers who were yawning lazily suddenly squatted down and hid under the battlements. Black shields rose from under the battlements, and the arrows pierced directly into the shields. General Ping Tian widened his eyes in astonishment. "What's going on? What's going on? They've already discovered it. They're just cooperating with you." The shields blocked the first wave of arrows. The soldiers hiding under the battlements hurriedly pushed the ballistae to the edge of the city wall. The arrows were already loaded. The ballistae could be used for both sieging and defending a city. According to Zhang Pengji and Zhang Ping's research, they further improved the known ballistae so that 6 heavy bows could be placed on them. They twisted the reel at the back, loaded the arrows, and used the combined force of the heavy bows to shoot special long arrows. The shooting range was 600 steps and it was extremely lethal. The shaft of the crossbow was made of wood, the head of the spear was made of iron, and the tail of the arrow was made of iron. According to Zhang Pengji's previous experiments, ordinary ladders, giant shields, and wooden curtains could be easily penetrated. It could be said to be as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The members of the Xueqi army were also within shooting range. Wasn't that courting death? The arrows left the bowstring and buzzed incessantly, as if carrying the roar of the crowd. The arrows rained down on the Xueqi army like the tide. When the shield on the city wall was raised to block the fire arrow, General Ping Tian was stunned. The vanguard troops of the Xueqi army had already carried ladders to the city walls, but they were greeted by tyrannical arrows. The arrows easily penetrated 2 or 3 people's bodies, and blood splattered everywhere. Their bodies tumbled due to the inertia of charging forward, and then they stopped breathing. The enemy was prepared. When General Ping Tian realized this, he was extremely shocked. He did not know where the news had leaked out. The soldiers on the city walls were obviously very sleepy. It did not seem fake at all, but reality slapped him hard in the face. After the first wave of arrows rained down, the members of the Xueqi army who were shot were either dead or no longer had the strength to fight. A strong smell of blood permeated the air. General Ping Tian gritted his teeth. He bet that Xiangyang district's defense was weak. As long as they climbed up the city walls, they would definitely win. They must not be scared off. Thinking of this, he roared, "Attack the city!" The ladders were placed on the city walls, so the crossbows could not reach them. The members of the Xueqi army would die faster if they escaped. No matter how fast they escaped, could they run 600 steps in an instant? In contrast, the city walls were closer to them. All of this was within Feng Jin's expectations. He raised his hand and covered his curled lips with his long sleeve. He also covered the bloodthirsty and fierce glint in his eyes. Prepare the rolling logs and stones. The city walls of Xiangyang district were not too high. The remaining members of the Xueqi army had already approached the city walls after leaving 700 to 800 corpses behind. The archers stood in the blind spot of the crossbows and shot. On the other side, members of the Xueqi army had already climbed up the ladders. The people who climbed up first were hit by the rolling logs and huge stones. They screamed and fell to the ground with a dull thud. Although the members of the Xueqi army fell miserably like dumplings, there were still people who approached the height of the city walls. Below them, they carried the heavy logs and hit the city gates. Each sound seemed to hit the hearts of everyone. Feng Jin continued to command calmly. Among the troops, there were experienced veterans. Naturally, there were also new recruits who had yet to see blood. They were so nervous that their hands were trembling. However, under Feng Jin's loud and calm command, their trembling hands and rapidly beating hearts gradually calmed down. Their brains could not think of anything else at all. Their bodies followed Feng Jin's command to move the equipment or load the bows and arrows. The wooden shield was very heavy. It required 3 people to hold it together to be able to stand steadily. It blocked the many rocket attacks of the members of the Xueqi army. Load the rocket, Feng Jin continued to command. The troops picked up the improved crossbows and lit the arrows. It was indeed difficult to move the crossbows, but it did not mean that they could not fight back. They would give them a taste of their own medicine. The rocket carried flames and pierced through the dark night sky. It pierced the members of the Xueqi army who were climbing the ladder and successfully pushed a group of people down. "Sir, the pressure at the city gates is getting stronger and stronger." Luoyue, who was dressed in armor, ran up from below the city with a ghastly pale face. Feng Jin said, "It's okay. Continue." There was more than one group of members of the Xueqi army attacking Xiangyang district. There was another group. As long as the city defense weapons were not exhausted, it was impossible for these people to climb the city walls. There was no doubt about the penetrating power of the improved crossbows. Coupled with the lethality of the rocket, almost every member of the Xueqi army who fell from the ladder did not have a chance to wake up. It was not only because the rocket penetrated their bodies, there was another important reason. Their companions stepped on their bodies to climb up the ladder. Even if their corpses were not completely dead, they were trampled into meat paste by these feet. Feng Jin continued to command the troops guarding the city. Everything was in order. Compared to the casualties at the bottom, the troops guarding the city were at most slightly injured. The logs below were still trying hard to hit the city gates. General Ping Tian's face was already ghastly pale and black. The city gates could not be climbed up and the city walls could not be broken. Could it be that the military strength of Xiangyang district was not as few as he thought? His firm heart had begun to waver. However, he had no way out now. If he retreated at that moment, he would definitely be annexed by the nearby Xueqi army. In serious cases, he might even lose his life. There was no possibility of him turning back now. He could only bite the bullet and go forward. At that moment, he hoped that the Tsing-yi army in Maolin district would attack Xiangyang district. In that case, the chances of winning would be greatly increased. The sound of hitting the city gates continued. Not only were there soldiers resisting inside the city gates, but there were also thick and heavy green bricks. Yes, Feng Jin had moved tens of thousands of green bricks produced from the brick kiln to the city gates to block them. Even if the Tsing-yi army used all their strength, would they be able to break it open in a short time? Chapter 519. Shangguan Wan had been living in the district headquarters for a while. Jiang Pengji originally wanted to arrange a two-level house for her, but she felt that she should not receive a reward without doing anything. She would only receive a reward after she had accumulated a certain amount of experience in the district headquarters. Otherwise, she would be dissatisfied and be criticized by others. Jiang Pengji knew Shangguan Wan's stubbornness, so she did not insist. It was good for her to live in the district headquarters. At least no one dared to ignore Shangguan Wan. The girls in the government office dared not belittle or neglect her. With her background, she got the hang of the work in the government office quickly. The girls gradually admired her and acknowledged her as their superior. Because the army took many talents with them, the pressure in the government office suddenly increased. Shangguan Wan was busy until the fourth watch before she finished her work. She washed her face with the cold well water to wash away her sleepiness. She was barely awake. The Tsing-yi army attacked wantonly. The soldiers were defending outside the city. Shangguan Wan was very worried, but she could not help much. She could only do the work at hand and try her best to reduce the administrative work. She planned to go back to her room to rest for a while. As she walked, she gently beat the sore spot on her neck with her fist. Halfway there, her sharp eyes saw a black shadow quickly drifting across the corridor, and her heart suddenly leaped into her throat. "Who's there?" Shangguan Wan secretly pulled out the short knife from her waist and looked in that direction vigilantly. After a while, the black shadow stopped and said to her, "Oh, it's Lady Shangguan." This voice. Isn't it Sister Lanting's maid, Takshu? Her tense nerves relaxed. Shangguan Wan sighed and said, "Oh, it's Sister Takshu. You scared me." She went forward and said, "Sister, are you getting up at night? Why didn't you light the lamp? It would be bad if you tripped because you couldn't see clearly." Shangguan Wan opened the paper and found that Takshu was still carrying a lamp. She helped Takshu light the lamp. She knew it. How could she not light the lamp when she woke up in the middle of the night? It was probably blown out by the strong night wind. "Thank you, Lady Shangguan," Takshu said gently. "Did you just come back from the government office?" "Yes, there are too many trivial things in the government office. But thinking of the chaos outside, these things have become sweet burdens." Shangguan Wan felt that she had found a new self. Whether it was her job in the government office or practicing martial arts to strengthen her body, she was full of motivation and vitality. Takshu was still gentle. She held the lantern and said, "It's dark outside. Lady Shangguan, go back to your room and rest. You still have work to do tomorrow." Shangguan Wan's room was very close. She declined Takshu's attempt to give her the lantern, waved her hand, and returned to her room while yawning. Takshu stood rooted to the ground for a long time. It was not until Shangguan Wan opened the door and lit the candle in the room that she revealed a strange smile. She turned her back to Shangguan Wan's room, raised her hand to the side of the lantern, and gently blew on the candle inside, extinguishing the flame inside. If Shangguan Wan had looked more carefully and focused, she would probably have noticed Takshu's abnormality. The clothes she wore on the outside were obviously much larger and did not seem to fit her body properly. The lapels of her clothes were grayish-brown in color. Takshu quietly left the district headquarters and took off her clothes, revealing her grayish-brown clothes. This was the uniform of the female battalion. She folded up her outer clothes and placed them in a corner of the alley. She stood rooted to the ground for a while. She looked at the west and north gates in the distance, and a hint of ruthlessness flashed in her eyes. After a long time, her figure disappeared into the darkness and shadows. She did not go to the west and north gates, but to the south gate. At the moment, the battle on Feng Jin's side had already entered a state of bloodthirst. Occasionally, one or two members of the Tsing-yi army would climb up the city walls. The soldiers would also work together to smack them down with their heavy shields. There were already several piles of corpses at the foot of the city walls. The Xueqi army stepped on their corpses and climbed up, getting closer and closer to the city walls. Below them, the frequency of hitting the city gates became faster and faster. Every time they hit, a layer of wall dust would fall. Dozens of cracks had already appeared on the sturdy city gates. It looked like it was about to be smashed. General Pingtian secretly gritted his teeth. Is this gate made of copper and iron? It's already so rotten, but it still hasn't been knocked open? Finally, when the Xueqi army was about to exhaust their strength, the city gates that could not bear the burden were finally scrapped. However, what blocked their way was a thick brick wall made of solid green bricks. There was no one behind the city gates to stop them. A group of soldiers were using green bricks to block the entrance. F***CKU. General Pingtian could not help but curse when he saw the situation. On the city walls, Feng Jin ordered someone to bring the wolf's fang slap over. He planned to teach the Xueqi army a lesson. Luo Yue had already rushed to the south gate to guard. It was estimated that another group of Xueqi army would arrive soon. Bring the wolf's fang slap. Feng Jin's voice was already hoarse. Even though he tried his best to shout loudly, he seemed especially weak in the midst of the battle cries. What was the wolf's fang slap? It was a rectangular object that was slightly flat. The surface was covered with sharp, thick, and long iron nails that were like wolf's teeth. There were buckles at the four corners, and they were hooked to the city walls with sliding ropes and pulleys. If the enemy intended to climb the city walls to attack, they could use the wolf's fang slap to hit them. With one slap, there would be dozens of bloody holes on the body. There were still plenty of weapons to defend the city, but the Xueqi army was already showing signs of defeat. In particular, the Xueqi army was filled with joy. They spent a lot of effort to break through the city gates, only to discover that the entrance had been blocked by countless neatly arranged green bricks. Breaking through them was no different than breaking through a city wall. That kind of feeling was simply terrible. Initially, they thought that they would be able to attack and take them down very quickly. They never expected the other party to be so well prepared and use all kinds of methods. General Pingtian was stunned. He never knew that defending a city could come up with so many tricks. Now he was in a dilemma. After fighting for nearly 4 hours, the Xueqi army had lost many men. Occasionally, some soldiers on the city walls were injured due to carelessness. They only had ladders and bows and arrows to attack the city, but the other party had ballistae, improved ballistae, wooden shields and fire arrows. If they were so capable, why were they holed up in the small Xiangyang district? Why couldn't they just go straight to heaven? General Pingtian was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He felt as if he had f***ked countless sows. He originally thought that he was there to f***ck the world, but he didn't expect that he would end up being the one to f***ck the world instead. After a while, the soldiers told Feng Jin that they had used up all the rocks and rolling logs, and there were not enough arrows in the quiver. Feng Jin gritted his teeth as he watched the Xueqi army gradually climb the city wall. Although they were killed, their numbers had obviously increased. Move the green bricks up. If there were not enough rocks, he would make up for the green bricks. He did not believe that he could not defeat the Xueqi army. Yes. Elsewhere, at the south gate. Luo Yue hurried to the south gate and found that there was no special situation there. It was also the soldiers' turn to change shifts. He asked the guards carefully, but he could not calm down. Chapter 5:20. All was silent. There was a chill in the corner outside Xiangyang district that made one's hair stand on end. Takshu, who was dressed in a female battalion uniform, waited in the dark for a while. There was a rustling sound in the bushes in the distance. After a while, a short figure wrapped in a thick black cloth emerged from the bushes. This strange person was abnormally short. When he stood up, he was only a head taller than the lush bushes outside the city. If he bent down and hid in the bushes, he would not be seen at all. The person groped his way to Takshu's position and made a strange chuckle. The person made a hoarse and piercing voice and said in a peculiar tone, "You're more precious than the princess in the palace. It's so hard to see you." Takshu was initially leaning against the corner of the city wall. When she saw the person approaching, she put down her arms and threw a parcel at him. "Here's what you want. Take it and get lost." Takshu threw the parcel into the man's arms and was about to leave. "Wait, little lady." The short man chuckled and asked in a strange voice, "I heard that Xiangyang district has countless riches. Even the priceless colored glaze wares come from here. You've been serving that young master personally for so many years. Don't tell me you don't even know the slightest bit of information? You send back useless things every time. Are you trying to get rid of a beggar? Takshu glanced sideways and looked down at the man coldly. She said, I've always ignored beggars. If they dare to pester me, they'll definitely die a horrible death. Tell me, if you're a beggar, how would I get rid of you? I'm just a lowly servant by her side. I can't enter places like the study, let alone get anything useful. I've tried my best. The man saw that Takshu was a little angry and quickly comforted her. Don't be angry, little lady. I'm only saying this because I have no other choice. You know that you haven't sent back much useful information all these years. The higher-ups are already angry. If you continue to slack, both you and I will have to bear the consequences. I don't think you want your beautiful sister to enter that kind of place and be defiled, right? Takshu sneered and said coldly, You're really useless. You keep threatening and using the same trick. The man chuckled and shamelessly admitted, It doesn't matter if the technique is old or not, as long as it works. I heard that Xueqi treats you very well. In the future, he can take you in as a concubine. If you can give birth to a son or a daughter, considering the relationship between master and servant, your life will be good. I only have a handle on your sister now. If I don't hold on to her tightly, with your intelligence, why would you risk your life for me? Takshu revealed a disgusted expression and lowered her head. She seemed to be thinking about what the other party had said and was deliberating about something. The man continued, Forget it. I heard that the glazed artifact is extremely precious. It belonged to the Marquis of Guanyi, Su Gong. Even mortals can't get their hands on it. Now, it's all been bought by the barbarians of the northern borderline with a huge sum of money. I'm not begging you to get me the colored glaze, but you have to find a way to get me the way to make the green brick. Don't tell me that you can't even do this after serving Xueqi for so many years. Takshu pursed her lips, and there was a look of struggle in her eyes. It was as if she was fighting with herself. After a while she said, I'll try my best, but I can't guarantee that I'll be able to get it. You know that Xueqi is extremely vigilant. Apart from herself, she doesn't trust anyone. Even I can't know all her secrets. The way to make the green brick is probably hidden in a secret place by her. I can only say that I'll try my best. How about this? Come back in half a year. Half a year. The man's voice suddenly rose. Takshu sneered. Half a year is already very stressful. Xueqi is no longer the young man who can be easily fooled. Now, he's as shrewd as an old fox. Even the slightest abnormality will be suspected by her. If I'm exposed, the last pawn that you've placed by her side will be useless. Who will pass on her news to you in the future? Xueqi has already defected. Don't expect her to be useful. The man hesitated and struggled in his heart. He still felt that half a year was too long. Takshu continued, She brings me with her wherever she goes now, and the county residence is usually strictly guarded. If she hadn't gone to war this time, how could I have found a chance to contact you? Half a year is stressful enough. If you think it's too long, get yourself another pawn. The man was almost choked by Takshu's words. If it was so easy to place pawns, why were there only Takshu and Xueqi after so many years? Xueqi had hugged Xueqi's thigh a long time ago and remarried. Fortunately, Xueqi did not know any confidential information. Otherwise, how could she be alive? Takshu was different. She was cruel and merciless, but she had helped them do many confidential things. It was not easy to raise a talent, and it was even more difficult to raise a talent who could avoid Xueqi's eyes and ears. Although Xueqi had been depressed for a while because of the death of his beloved wife, he was still very strict with his supervision and cleanliness of the backyard. He had quietly gotten rid of all the spies he had planted. One by one, they had died a miserable death. His methods of killing were extremely cruel. He had clearly vented his anger over his wife's death on these spies. Even when Xueqi went to Hu County, the Lu residence was still guarded by Gu Zhan and Bai Dai. It was still watertight. He had spent a lot of effort to protect these two pawns. He was not willing to give up on Takshu now. The man said, All right, I'll give you half a year. You must get the method to make the blue brick. Takshu nodded. Her cold expression became a little more gentle. In the end, she asked hesitantly, How is my sister doing now? the man said unhappily. She's not much worse than the Empress's life. She's doing well. That's good. Takshu heaved a sigh of relief. Before she left, the man asked again, are there really no other daughters in the Lu residence? Takshu's expression did not change. No. Isn't the only daughter of a mistress married into the royal family? The man muttered to himself and left with a small bag that Takshu had given him. Before he left, he did not forget to remind her. Takshu, we've known each other for more than 10 years. You and I both know that don't be as silly as Xuanmei. We have to be loyal to our master so that we can have a good life in the future. Remember, we are the most obedient dogs of our master. We can only bark when she asks us to bark. Otherwise, we'll be barking wildly. That's mad dogs. Don't be won over by Lu Shi. After the man finished speaking, he went back into the bushes. The night wind blew, and the darkness of the night covered Takshu's strange and cold expression. Who said that I'm loyal to your master or Lu Shi? Chapter 521. Seriously, letting a bunch of weak women guard the city gate. Is there something wrong with the higher-ups' brains? At the south gate, the soldier guarding the gate yawned and squeezed out 2 drops of tears from the corner of his eyes. He complained lazily. His companion, who was patrolling with him, lowered his voice and said, don't talk nonsense. We can't afford to offend those women. What's wrong? The soldier raised his right eyelid lazily and said disdainfully, I used to be a bandit. Although I've turned over a new leaf, it's not like I haven't tasted women before. They only know how to scream when they encounter something, and they're as weak as a kitten. Before the soldier turned over a new leaf, he was a bandit who robbed houses. It wasn't that he was bad by nature, but that life was too harsh. Like the youths in the village, he had no choice but to become a bandit. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to survive. There were many bandits like him who were recruited to turn over a new leaf. Now that he had become a good person and stopped committing crimes, it didn't mean that everything in the past could be written off, nor could it be treated as if nothing had happened. His companion lowered his head and thought for a while. The other women are like that, but these, it's best not to say that. Seeing his companion's secretive look, the soldier was surprised and asked curiously, what's so special about these women? His companion thought for a while and said, in short, they're different from those who only know how to cry and drag us down. The spears in their hands aren't just for show. They're all used to kill people, and they know martial arts too. Unfortunately, I heard that the higher-ups have decreed that these female soldiers can only retire from the army at the age of 24, get married, and have children. Otherwise, I really want my mother to propose marriage. The soldier almost burst out laughing. You blockhead. You're really strange. You don't want a fragrant and soft woman, but a female worm? You're really young and don't understand the taste of women. When you're older and more knowledgeable, you'll know what a real woman is. His companion blushed at the soldier's teasing. How could he not understand the meaning behind the soldier's words? However, he still shook his head honestly and lowered his voice with a hint of embarrassment. I think a female worm is pretty good. Let her be fierce, his companion said a little uneasily. But, isn't the world different now? He heard from his brothers that the man-eating beasts of the north borderline coveted Dongqing. Say, if the wife he married met those beasts and only knew how to cry and scream, wouldn't she be pinned to the ground and gang-raped in the end? At least I have a life, but what if I get eaten? The soldier was taken aback, as if he hadn't thought of this. While they were talking, there were 2 female soldiers patrolling opposite them. What's the matter? The other side asked. The soldier replied, everything is normal. The 2 sides continued patrolling. Watching the 2 female soldiers leave, the soldier muttered, they're quite decent. At this time, the battle between North and West Gate had reached its climax. After the rubble was used up, pieces of green bricks faced the Tsing-Yi army and smashed them down one by one. By the time the extra bricks were used up, there was already a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood beneath the city walls. Both parties were already in a killing frenzy. More and more members of the Tsing-Yi army climbed up the city walls, while more members of the Tsing-Yi army were sleeping under the city walls. The soldiers on the city walls defended the territory of the city walls with their flesh and blood. They fought for every inch of land, and the sounds of killing resounded through the clouds. Tonight was destined to be a bloody night. No one could sleep in peace. Fortunately, the previous bloody battle had depleted most of the main forces of the Xueqi army. In the end, only 600 or 700 members of the Xueqi army could climb up the city walls. Under Feng Jin's orderly command, they used the remaining defensive equipment to stubbornly defend. They advanced or retreated, making use of the geographical advantage of the city walls to slowly whittle down the strength of the Xueqi army. In terms of defensive equipment, Xiangyang district did not lack it at all. However, they were fighting on two fronts, so half of the equipment was allocated to the other side. Feng Jin was tense all along. Even though he was standing at the back and commanding, there were still members of the Xueqi army who rushed to him. Fresh blood dyed his wide sleeves and cloak red. Occasionally, severed limbs and broken bones or the heads of strangers rolled to his feet. There was almost no place on the entire city walls that was clean. Dawn had just broken. There were a few sparse stars in the dark sky. The orange morning sun shone on the world and broke through the night sky. The killing cries at the west and north gate gradually subsided. General Ping Tian did not even step down the stairs of the city walls. He was stabbed to death by a long spear. The stairs were filled with corpses. Most of them were the enemies. Occasionally, there were their comrades. At this moment, the battle at the south gate had just begun. The Xueqi army in Maolin district was also aggressive. However, they did not launch a sneak attack in the middle of the night. Instead, they chose to launch a strong attack when the night was about to break. The number of Xueqi army troops they brought was 2,000 more than the number at the west gate. As the soldiers at the city gates were already prepared, the first wave of sneak attacks did not cause any casualties with the wooden shields. As the leader of the Imperial Guards, Luoyue had excellent abilities. It was just a battle to defend the city. It was not enough to make him flustered. Different from Feng Jin's meticulous arrangements, Luoyue's commands were more rigid. If Feng Jin was said to be a seemingly soft but dense net that did not leave a single gap, Luoyue was a thick and strong shield. The former was more meticulous, while the latter was more steady. Jiang Pengji took away most of the elites, but the female battalion only took away 500 to 600 people. The number of female soldiers who stayed behind was almost a quarter of the garrison in Xiangyang district. Luoyue heard them say that the strength of the female battalion was not bad, but he did not witness it with his own eyes. However, the reality was far better than what Luoyue had imagined. He initially thought that they had not seen blood before. Faced with such a large battle formation, they would panic or scream in fear. In the end they did not. He secretly lamented that Jiang Nongqin and his lord were good at training people. In his impression, the female soldiers who only knew how to cry actually had courage that did not lose to the men. They used the improved crossbows well and their shooting accuracy was not the least bit inferior. Indeed, who would care about gender at the juncture of life and death? The female and male soldiers cooperated to load the crossbows and shoot at the attacking enemy. The soldiers who raised their shields blocked wave after wave of arrows that were shot from below the city. However, there were always stray arrows that passed through the wooden shields and injured people. They pierced into the flesh. Although it was not fatal, the injury was not light. At such a time, naturally, no one could bring the injured down for treatment. They could only use brute force to pull the arrowheads out. Then, they used a torn piece of cloth to bandage the wound tightly to prevent it from bleeding too much. Compared to the west and north gates, the south gate had more resources to defend the city. The crossbows stopped the enemy at a distance of 500 steps away. The Xueqi army tried to approach the south gate with their shields, but the penetrating power of the crossbows was far more terrifying than they had imagined. However, although the crossbows were powerful, there were only more than 30 on the city walls. It was impossible to stop all the Xueqi army. Finally, they abandoned hundreds of corpses and finally approached the blind spot of the crossbows. Chapter 522. When General Ping Tian left Jiaoping district with his troops and horses, intending to launch a sneak attack on Xiangyang district, Jiang Pengji was leading 1,500 elites to deviate from their marching route and quietly sneak toward his lair. She even brought a lot of siege equipment. Looking at Jiang Pengji, who was eager to fight and excited, Qiguan Rang could only smile bitterly and say, "My lord, I don't want to go back and be scolded by Xiao Yu and Zixiao. If you're injured, it'll be hard to explain when you go back." In other words, if Jiang Pengji had the ability to ensure that she would be unscathed, she could do whatever she wanted. Jiang Pengji could not help but laugh when she heard that. She said, What you mean by that is interesting. You make it seem like I'm going to do something bad. Qiguan Rang raised his eyebrows and asked Jiang Pengji with his eyes. Isn't that considered doing something bad? If she brought Xueqi or Wei Ci, she would definitely be stopped. However, since she brought Qiguan Rang, he would not stop her. Fine. I'm doing something bad, alright? Jiang Pengji could not help but laugh. She lowered her voice and said to Qiguan Rang, according to what you said, I'm doing something bad by rushing in front. Then, aren't you, Qiguan Rang, a servant who watches the door for me? As she spoke, a black shadow appeared in her line of sight. Jiaoping district was lying on the horizon, like a ferocious beast in deep sleep. It made people feel nervous for no reason. These troops were basically elite veterans with rich experience in battles. They were very familiar with how to approach their target without batting an eyelid. After about an hour, they finally approached Jiaoping district. There were very few guards on the city wall. Each of them yawned continuously. Qiguan Rang was a scholar. He could not care less about how dirty the ground was. He could only learn to hide in the dark. After looking for a long time, he realized that there were very few people on the city wall. It was obvious that the security was not strict. Jiang Pengji lay in the grass. Her eyesight and night vision were far better than ordinary people's. She asked Qiguan Rang, "Do you think there's a trap up there?" Qiguan Rang secretly rolled his eyes. If he said there was a trap, would his lord obediently guard the rear? Definitely not. The Tsing-Yi army led at least 5,000 people out of the city. According to the news, there are at most 7,000 Tsing-Yi army soldiers in Jiaoping district. In other words, there are only about 1,000 to 2,000 Tsing-Yi army soldiers in the city. There are so few of them, it's not even enough for one bite. Qiguan Rang said carefully. Jiang Pengji's facial expression did not change. The leader of the Tsing-Yi army in Jiaoping district is an extremely magnanimous person. He doesn't have any abilities, yet he dares to bring so many people with him. Isn't he afraid that his nest will be destroyed? Jiang Pengji clicked her tongue and said sarcastically, "Wenjing, don't you think so?" Qiguan Rang indicated that he could not answer this question. In terms of magnanimity, who could be more magnanimous than the lord beside him? If Xueqi and the others hadn't stopped her, she might have left a few soldiers guarding the gate and left with all her belongings. Qiguan Rang heaved a long sigh as he thought of Feng Jin, who had brought 4,000 soldiers to guard Xiangyang district. He sympathized with his brother very much. When his lord had just entered Xiangyang district, Qiguan Rang had guarded Xiangyang district. At that time, there weren't so many city defense weapons. They relied entirely on tactics and ruthless schemes, as well as the soldiers' bravery and fearlessness. Only then did they manage to repel the Tsing-Yi army. Of course, if the Tsing-Yi army had enough rations at that time, Xiangyang district would probably be destroyed. Therefore, as someone who had been through it, Qiguan Rang could completely understand the feeling of being bullied and wanting to curse at the same time. It felt extremely good. There were hundreds of thousands of viewers who had the same opinion as Qiguan Rang. Xinbang, trash streamer, how can a crow laugh at a pig? Reflect on yourself when you criticize others for being magnanimous. Jintian Bougie, streamer, you're a typical example of a magistrate being allowed to do whatever he wants, but the people aren't allowed to light up the lamps. She's too overbearing. Nenjiujing, dear friends, you have to know that the outcome of a protagonist courting death and a cannon fodder courting death is different. Obviously, Jiang Pengji was the protagonist. Not only did she have the halo of a protagonist, but she also had powerful abilities. If she courted death, others would die. If the cannon fodder courted death, they would die. General Ping Tian was obviously such a cannon fodder. He was thinking about the delicacies in other people's pot and completely forgot that he was cooking porridge in his own pot. You're right, my lord. Qiguan Rang abandoned his moral integrity and chose to go along with Devil King Zhang's words. I have a novel idea. I don't know if I can give it a try. Jiang Pengji hid in the bushes and held a meeting with her strategist. The troops waited silently for further instructions. Qiguan Rang's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. He was afraid that his lord would cause trouble again. If anything happened to her, he was really afraid that Xueqi and Wei Ci would kill him when he returned. Xueqi was still all right as he was somewhat honest, but Wei Ci was weak and black-hearted. Qiguan Rang really did not want to offend him. What idea? Qiguan Rang asked. Jiang Pengji waved her hand and said to him, "Come closer and listen carefully." After listening, Qiguan Rang felt that he had opened the door to a new world. It turned out that attacking a city could be done this way. How dirty was his lord's heart! Even the mother river of Dongqing could not wash it clean, okay? On the other side, Li Yun, Su Ku, and the others led the remaining 2,000 troops to Maolin district at top speed. Along the way, no one dared to talk or joke around. Most of the troops were trained to march a short distance with heavy loads. Apart from Su Ku, who was a scholar and could not bear it, the rest of them looked all right. What was surprising was that the hundreds of female troops who were thought to be left behind followed closely, but their faces were pale. In comparison, Su Ku, who was panting while riding a horse, was the most useless in the entire army. Because they deliberately took a detour to avoid the Tsing-Yi army in Maolin district, the entire 2,000 troops rested and reorganized in a call in the mountains. They were prepared to attack Maolin district after the Tsing-Yi army left. Su Ku moved his legs uncomfortably. His face was ghastly pale. Li Yun, the honest lad, saw that Su Ku's movements were a little strange, so he opened his mouth to ask, "Your inner thighs are torn? It hurts a little when you walk, but it will be fine after applying some medicine. I have something for you, sir. Do you want it?" Su Ku's face darkened. He noticed that the surrounding people were looking at him suspiciously. He rejected them awkwardly. "No need, I'm fine." Li Yun adjusted his breathing while showing concern for Su Ku. "Sir, you don't look well." Su Ku's mouth twitched. Silence was golden. Faced with such an honest lad, how could a normal person look well? "I'm just worried about the Lord's side. Will there be any changes?" Su Ku casually changed the topic. Because of her willfulness, Jiang Pengji only brought 1,500 elites and a few siege weapons. It was impossible for Su Ku not to worry. But thinking that the Lord had also brought troops to occupy Xiangyang district, he felt that he was worrying too much. Reality proved that his Lord's thinking was not something that ordinary people could understand. Chapter 523. Qiguan Rang had always thought that his heart was dirty enough, but he did not expect his lord to be even dirtier. Not only did she sneak attack the enemy's lair, she even wanted to conquer Jiaoping district without expending a single soldier. With such capabilities, why didn't she ascend to heaven? Jiang Pengji glared at Qiguan Rang. "Why are you looking at me like that? I'm just giving it a try. Anyway, there's still plenty of time." He silently shut up, then passed an order to the soldiers behind him. He asked them to find a soldier who was fluent in the northern dialect. Not long after, an ordinary-looking soldier who could not be found in a sea of people was brought over. Qiguan Rang glanced at him. "Are you usually quick-witted?" Although the soldier looked very ordinary, his eyes were exceptionally spirited. One look and one could tell that he was quick-witted. The soldier was a little puzzled, but it was rare for him to speak to someone above him. He must have performed well. The soldier smiled foolishly and said, "Clever. I'm very clever. I'm not stupid at all." Qiguan Rang asked again, "How clever are you?" The soldier was puzzled, but he said, "Very clever. My mother wants to beat me. No matter how angry she is, she will calm down as long as I speak." Qiguan Rang frowned and thought for a while. He waved at him. "Come here. I have a task for you. Do it well. If you do it well, you'll be rewarded." When the soldier heard that there was a reward, his eyes lit up. He hurriedly replied, "Just tell me, sir. I'll definitely do it well." Qiguan Rang said, "Come closer and tell me in detail." Jiaoping district was located in a remote area. There were only 1,000 Tsing-Yi army soldiers in the city. It was extremely stressful to guard the 4 city gates with such a small number of people. The Tsing-Yi army was not a regular army. Those who stayed were old and weak, disabled, or those who liked to cheat. It was late at night. Many of them hugged their spears and leaned against the pilings of the wall to sleep. It was not difficult for those who were slightly better at martial arts to climb over the wall. Spring plowing had just ended, and the weather was erratic. It was slightly warmer on the whole. At night, the night wind was still bone-chilling. The people of Jiaoping district were having a hard time. They were like sheep reared by the Tsing-Yi army, and they would come and pluck a layer of wool from time to time. Unfortunately, the Tsing-Yi army did not treat the people well, and they did not know how to govern. They just blindly prevented the people from leaving Jiaoping district, and their methods became harsher and harsher. This caused the people's lives to become more and more miserable. Once night fell, the people would try to escape. In the beginning, the Xueqi army used forceful methods to deter and intimidate the people in Jiaoping district. The people were afraid that they would be in trouble, so the number of people who escaped gradually decreased. However, the increasingly difficult life tormented the people, causing them to rather risk being discovered and executed to escape. However, the city gates were tightly shut. How were they going to escape? Little did they know that in this world, money could make the devil push the millstone, and even the devil push the millstone. As long as he gritted his teeth and took out his belongings to bribe the Xueqi army that guarded the city gate that day, if he was lucky, he could still get out. The Xueqi army was just a motley crew, and they were all commoners. Who wouldn't be willing to turn a blind eye and let one or two unimportant commoners go to earn some extra money? Of course, when doing this business, he couldn't let the higher-ups know. For the Xueqi army that guarded the city gates, this was a lucrative job. The trivial matters in Jiaoping district had long been reported back to Xiangyang district by the spies. Jiang Pengji had been unhappy with the neighbors around her for a long time. Only by knowing oneself and the enemy could one emerge victorious in 100 battles. She understood Jiaoping district very well. The soldier she chose was indeed a clever person. He found a secluded place and climbed over the city wall. Then, he squatted near the northeast corner gate that Jiang Pengji mentioned for a quarter of an hour. As expected, he saw a few sneaky figures. He hurriedly waved his hands to stop them. They also wanted to smuggle out, but they were discovered by the soldier. How would they dare to make a fuss? Each of them was scared out of their wits. They were worried that if they were caught by the Xueqi army, their whole family would be beaten to death. "Brother, I want to ask you something." The soldier had changed into the linen clothes of the commoners. He spoke with a northern dialect, and it was obvious that he was a local nearby. However, he lowered his voice, and it sounded a little strange. "Are you also prepared to fork out money to leave the city?" There were a total of 9 people in this group. There were 2 old people, 3 adult men, and 2 emaciated women. They were all carrying children who were sleeping soundly in their arms. "What do you want?" The leader, a strong man, glared at the soldier fiercely. He looked like he would take action if the soldier dared to make trouble and steal their money. The soldier said calmly, "Hey, don't be anxious. I don't have any bad intentions. It's just that your family is quite pitiful. Most of your life savings have been given to those Xueqi bastards. I feel pity for you." "Who are you?" The strong man did not relax. He used his body to block the soldier's line of sight. I'm from Xiangyang. Look, I'm wearing real woolen clothes." As he spoke, the soldier rolled up his sleeves slightly and pulled out the cuffs of the layer of woolen undershirt that was used to keep out the cold. He sized up the crowd with a disdainful look. "This outfit costs a few hundred coins. Do you think I care about your little money? To be honest, I escaped from here last winter. At that time, I was short of money, so I didn't bring my mother with me. This time, while the Xueqi army is about to collapse, I sneaked in ahead of time and brought my mother to Xiangyang to enjoy a comfortable life." The soldier's words were convincing. He was also a complete actor. He did not even blush when he lied and boasted. Most of the people in Jiaoping district had heard of woolen clothes, but they had never seen them before. However, the strong man's attention was not on the snow-white woolen sleeves, but on something else. "What do you mean that Xueqi army has collapsed?" The soldier was startled and said, "You don't know? The Xueqi bastards took the people to war. We don't know when they'll return. There are thousands of bastards in the district now, but most of them are still sleeping like pigs. I reckon that even if we cut off their heads now, they probably won't wake up. Otherwise, how did little brother crawl in? I think it's easy for you guys to flirt with the Xueqi bastards at the city gate. There's no need to pay. I stopped you to ask where the people in Dogtail Alley went. I couldn't find my mother for a long time." The strong man thought for a while and asked his wife. He said to the soldier, "The houses in that alley have been requisitioned by those bastards. The people living there have been driven to the north of the city. Your mother should be in the north of the city." The soldier nodded happily. "All right, thank you, big brother. I'll bring my mother to Xiangyang to enjoy a comfortable life." However, before he could take a step, he was stopped by the strong man. The man asked, "Little brother, you said those Xueqi bastards were taken to war." Chapter 524. The soldier vividly portrayed a talkative and warm-hearted young man. While he was enthusiastically concerned about the family, he complained about how tough his life was before he went to Xiangyang and how good his life was after he went there. Indeed, if his life was not good, how could he afford to wear woolen clothes that cost hundreds of copper coins? After rambling for a while, the soldier said casually, "By the way, brothers, I'll share my experience with you as someone who has been through it. If you're planning to go to Xiangyang, I suggest you go to Cheng'an district first. It's nearer." Cheng'an district? The strong man had completely let down his guard. He couldn't wait to know more about the outside world. He frowned and said suspiciously, "I heard that Cheng'an district has become a ghost. The Xueqi bastards there are even more inhuman than the ones here. If our family goes there, it's no different from looking for the king of hell to reincarnate." The soldier was also startled for a moment. Then he let out a hey, and slapped his forehead with his hand, smiling awkwardly. "Look at my bad memory. I forgot to tell you that the bastards in Cheng'an district have been taken care of." The soldier lowered his voice and there was a tinge of excitement in his words. "The person who took care of these bastards is the one in Xiangyang district. He's amazing. He took care of them in half a day." The few men's eyes lit up when they heard that. They squeezed the soldier's hand excitedly. "Really?" The soldier nodded heavily and said, "It's true. How can it be fake? It's not easy to get a household registration in Xiangyang district. Those newly built houses can't be bought no matter how hard they try. Brothers, go to Cheng'an district and wait. Imagine what Xiangyang district looked like in the past. It was also occupied by the Xueqi bastards. Now, it's like a paradise on earth. It's so beautiful." The strong man followed the soldier's lead and asked, "Do you think that Cheng'an district will be as good as Xiangyang district in the future?" The soldier nodded affirmatively. "Of course. I heard that the magistrate of Xiangyang district is short of manpower. I plan to settle down and find a good job there in the future. Last year, I didn't make it in time. Everything was almost built when I went there. I heard that those hard-working families can earn enough money to buy a house. They don't have to worry about food and drink." The soldiers could praise Xiangyang district for hours without stopping, but now was not the time to be chattering and showing off. The soldier was beaming with joy as he spoke, as if Xiangyang district was really a paradise on earth. Of course, for these people who were tortured by war and poverty, it was no longer as simple as a paradise on earth. The soldier said a lot of things and muttered regretfully, "It's a pity that I don't know when the magistrate of Xiangyang district will come here. If he comes here, maybe I don't have to take my mother away. Say, look at my mouth, I can't stop talking. Brother, please don't laugh at me. It's getting late, I have to take advantage of the dark to pick up my mother." The soldier's careless words struck the hearts of a few strong men. No one would want to leave their homeland unless they really couldn't live anymore. Not to mention that the price of leaving was emptying their family's savings. Now that there was a great opportunity in front of them, if they could grasp it, they would prosper in the future. The rumors of Xiangyang district that they had heard in the past surfaced in their minds, and their hearts thumped wildly. The few brothers looked at each other and saw the determination in each other's eyes. "Big brother, what do you think? Do you want to do it?" "I want to do it. My parents are old, my wife just gave birth to a baby, and the baby is still young. How can they withstand the torment? Why don't we do it and capture all those bastards, then send someone to Cheng'an to invite those lords over? Otherwise, how are we going to live?" The third person also agreed, but one of the women was carrying a child who was sleeping soundly and looked worried. "But, what if those Xueqi bastards come back?" The soldier's heart skipped a beat. He secretly thought that this woman was going to ruin things. He looked as if he had just understood and smiled sheepishly. "Sister-in-law is right. You guys better not take the risk. Run away if you can. We're not saints, it's enough as long as we can control ourselves. I see that the uncles and aunties aren't young anymore. Big brothers, find some helpers and beat up those bastards at the city gate. Run away if you can. This place is deep, and it's not easy to run away." The few men looked hesitant and struggled. The soldier's heart stirred, and he added fuel to the fire. "Big brothers, You guys have reminded me. The man in the prime of life asked. Remind what? The soldier said matter-of-factly. Offer the city. If I persuade the villagers and this matter succeeds, won't it be a great merit? As soon as he said this, the three men's expressions changed abruptly, and the greed in their hearts gained the upper hand. Yes, if they were to offer Jiaoping district, it would be a great merit. Why didn't they think of it in such a short time? They were almost delayed by their own women and pushed away such a good thing for no reason. Thinking of this, he glared fiercely at the woman who spoke, causing her to shrink her neck in fear. Fearing that this merit would be taken away by the soldier, the three men first said with embarrassment that they had left something at home and asked him to take care of it. Of course, to be on the safe side, the two older brothers left, leaving the youngest brother to delay the soldier. The soldier secretly heaved a long sigh of relief. It was not easy to fool people these days. His master Qiguan said that if there was no movement in the city at dawn, the elites outside would attack Jiaoping district. Now that it was night time, if they moved quickly, they should be able to catch up. Seeing the family return, the soldier who was hiding in the dark frowned and secretly rejoiced that he was lucky. Looking at the big brother who held him back, the soldier's heart skipped a beat. He pretended to be an enthusiastic and simple-minded fool. Outside the city, Jiang Pengji sleepily yawned. Qiguan Rang looked up at the moonlight, and he was somewhat uncertain. Could a single soldier really instigate the people in the city to rebel? If Jiaoping district has sufficient troops, the people who are used to being oppressed and threatened will most likely not have the guts to rebel. However, there are only 1,000 people in the Xueqi army in the city, and it's the time when everyone is sleepy and asleep. It's a dark and windy night, the time to commit murder and arson. While they were talking, a conspiracy was brewing in Jiaoping district. The oppressed people formed groups of 3 to 5. They held their own kitchen knives for cooking, chopping firewood, carrying poles for carrying firewood, clubs for washing clothes. They took whatever they could and rushed madly to the territory of the Xueqi army, which they knew was the territory of the Xueqi army. Most of the members of the Xueqi army who were guarding the place were already drowsy, and some directly entered their dreams to look for the Lord of Zhou. Chapter 525. Many members of the Xueqi army were hacked or hammered to death in their sleep. Some were lucky enough not to be beaten to death. They were just tied up with ropes and stuffed in their mouths to prevent them from making any noise and waking up the other members of the Xueqi army. In the beginning, these people were still anxious and uneasy. They only had some courage when they acted with people they were familiar with. However, after 1 or 2 times, they saw that the beasts who once bullied them were no longer angry. The little fear in their hearts dissipated. Just as they saw, the members of the Xueqi army were not made of copper and iron. They would still die if their heads were chopped off. This rebellion plot lasted for a whole hour. The heavy night sky gradually faded, and there were a few more traces of green and white. Jiang Pengji crossed her arms and sat in the grass. Her back was straight, her head was slightly lowered, and her eyes were closed. Others thought she was closing her eyes to take a nap, but in fact, she was sleeping. Yes, she was sleeping. Qiguan Rang looked at his lord in amazement. She had maintained this sleeping position for more than 2 hours. What are you surprised about? Jiang Pengji suddenly opened her eyes and said calmly, as a qualified general, you should develop this habit. No matter what environment you are in, you should be able to fall asleep quickly and conserve your energy. Don't make a fuss about nothing. She woke up and slept as she pleased. Jiang Pengji looked up at the sky and frowned slightly. Is there still no movement in Jiaoping district? Qiguan Rang said, I've already sent scouts to gather information. They should be back soon. At that moment, Jiang Pengji glanced at the city wall in the distance. The guards who should have been standing on it had disappeared. She said, it should be about time. Let's put on an act until the end. Let's retreat for a distance before coming back. Qiguan Rang was startled. Jiang Pengji said matter-of-factly, otherwise when people leave the city and see a group of us rubbing our hands together, won't they know that there's something fishy going on? They offered the city, and we passively took it over. Jiaoping district was not seized by us, understand? It was seized, and others rushed to deliver it. The two sounded different. Qiguan Rang almost choked. Why didn't he know that his lord had such a shameless side to her? Thinking of something, Qiguan Rang said, if that's the case, There won't be a chance for the Lord to display his skills. Jiaoping district was conquered without bloodshed, and it was because the others had rushed to help. Naturally, Jiang Pengji did not have to charge and break through enemy lines. She said, "Look at what you're saying. It's as if I'm a bloody warrior. People would die in war. Even if it was an overwhelming victory, it was hard to guarantee that there would be no casualties. It would be best if they could take over Jiaoping district peacefully. Why are you fighting? You're harming the harmony of the world." Jiang Pengji spoke righteously. Not only did Qiguan Rang think she was shameless, but the audience who stayed up late to watch the live stream also ridiculed her. Yuan Tong Courier, hee, the biggest joke of the year, the host is a pacifist. Zhongtong Express Post. I think there's nothing wrong with the host's words. The enemy's life is not life, but the life of one's family is different. Shentong Express. Sigh, the streamer must have forgotten how much she wanted to fight on the battlefield. I could feel the resentment emanating from her even through the screen. Now, he turned around and said that he was a pacifist. Didn't he feel ashamed? In fact, Jiang Pengji was indeed a pacifist, but her piece was to stop killing by killing. She killed the enemy. She did not care how many enemies died, but she would avoid unnecessary losses on her side if possible. Before Qiguan Rang could speak, Jiang Pengji said, "According to the time and distance, after we take over Jiaoping district, if we take shortcuts, we can rush back to Xiangyang district and attack the rear of the Qingyi army. I'm worried that we can't defend Xiangyang district." After taking over Jiaoping district without bloodshed, the loss of troops on Jiang Pengji's side was almost zero. The biggest advantage of taking over peacefully was that she did not need to spend time to appease the people. She could even temporarily recruit a group of people to help defend Jiaoping district. She could bring 1,000 troops to aid Xiangyang district. This was the fastest way she could think of. Qiguan Rang frowned and asked, "How can this be? 4,000 troops are indeed tight, but Huayu and Coach Luoyue are not easy to deal with. The defense in the city is perfect. It's almost impossible for a motley crew like the Qingyi army to take over Xiangyang district." "You said it's almost impossible, not absolutely." Jiang Pengji's face darkened as she said, "Wen Zheng, do you still remember when I left Hejian and followed my father to Shangjing? Why did I entrust the troops to you to take care of them?" Qiguan Rang did not understand. He carefully recalled the memory of that time and suddenly thought of something. His expression changed slightly. "My lord, you mean Lady Takshu?" Qiguan Rang was stunned. That year, Jiang Pengji sneaked into Wei Yuan's residence late at night and entrusted the trifling matters of the troops to Qiguan Rang. Between her words, she hinted that there was a dirty person around her. At that time, Qiguan Rang did not know who she was until she left Xuanmei behind and took Takshu away. According to his understanding of Jiang Pengji, the more dangerous something was, the more she liked to keep an eye on it. Later, when Xueqi married Xuanmei, Qiguan Rang was even more certain of his guess. "My lord is really muddle-headed. Since you're sure that there's something wrong with Takshu, why don't you?" Qiguan Rang looked anxious. Takshu's identity had yet to be revealed. If she did something in Xiangyang district, it would be hard to guard against it. Jiang Pengji raised her eyes lazily and said, "Wen Zheng, don't worry. Although I'm a little risky, I'm not fooling around. There's something wrong with Takshu, and it's a big problem. Do you understand that she has more than one master behind her back? After so many years, I've found out about one of them, but I've never had a clue about the other. It's better to keep her by my side than to plot in the dark. But if she takes advantage of this crisis and lets the Qingyi army enter the city, she won't do that." Jiang Pengji sneered and said with absolute certainty, "Before achieving a certain goal, she won't do anything to hurt me. Perhaps more than anyone else, she hopes that I can gain a foothold in the north." Qiguan Rang was speechless. His intelligent brain felt inadequate. Suddenly, he said irritably, "Isn't Lady Takshu the personal maid that the old master prepared for you? How could she be taken advantage of?" Jiang Pengji said meaningfully, "Yes, my father prepared her, but she can't handle her long hands. If she told Qiguan Rang that there was something wrong with Xuanmei, he would probably go crazy. What kind of luck does my father have? There's something wrong with the two people he arranged." TSK. As they were talking, the tightly shut city gate of Jiaoping district opened. A group of more than 100 people sneaked out of the city before dawn. About half an hour later, the two groups of people met on the way. The people were trembling with fear. Jiang Pengji looked solemn and reported her origins in a low voice. I'm the district magistrate of Xiangyang district, Lu Shi. Who are you and where are you from? Lu Shi? The district magistrate of Xiangyang district? The people were in an uproar and they discussed animatedly. At that moment, a rather old leader slowly stepped out of the ranks and bowed with his hands folded in front. We are the people of Jiaoping district. The people of Jiaoping district? Why are you here? Chapter 526. As the old man knelt, the hundreds of people behind him also knelt on the ground, begging. Each of them was sallow and emaciated, and their skin had an unhealthy color to it. It was as if they would faint if they said two more words. The audience in the streaming room could not bear to see this. They could not help but send bullet screens to advise Jiang Pengji to stop putting on a show and quickly accept these people. Yibio, streamer, they look so pitiful. Didn't you say that the common people are like duckweed in troubled times? They're begging you so much. Just accept them. Anyway, this is also one of your plans. It's not good to let them kneel. Jogging Yizhang. Tisk, that's why I said the streamer's heart is really dirty. It's obvious that she covets Jiaoping district. She secretly instigated people to kill the Tsing-Yi army who stayed behind and begged her to accept Jiaoping district. TSK, she gets all the good things. Is there any justice? Wu to Wuchi. This scene reminds me of a TV series I used to watch. The situation was similar. The refugees were begging the protagonist. At that time, he felt that it was a little funny. After all, the extras didn't act well. The refugees didn't look like refugees, nor did they look like they were begging. It was more like they were watching the protagonist's monkey show, which made people feel awkward. Looking at this scene, to be honest, I felt that I needed to calm down. Qitian Shuangbi. You guys are thinking too much. Is the streamer the kind of person who likes to put on airs? The facts proved that Jiang Pengji was not. At least she would not make the people kneel on the ground and kowtow until their heads were broken. All of you, stand up and speak. If you have any grievances, feel free to speak up. If I, Lu Shi, can help everyone settle it, I will definitely not refuse. Jiang Pengji dismounted from the horse and helped the few people who were kneeling in front of her up. It's deep in the night and the ground is moist. Get up and talk. The leading old man had a high EQ. Naturally, he wouldn't kneel on the ground and say things like, if you don't listen to us, we won't get up. This wasn't begging for mercy, it was another form of blackmail. So when Jiang Pengji helped him up, he stood up. This old man was quite prestigious in Jiaoping district. When the other commoners saw that he had gotten up, they helped each other up from the ground. The old man bowed again and said, Magistrate Lu, where are you preparing to go with your troops? Jiang Pengji said, I heard that Chang'an, Jiaoping, and Maolin districts are plagued by bandits from the Tsing-Yi army. The people have no way of making a living, so I came over to clear them out. The members of the Tsing-Yi army in Chang'an district have all been killed. They originally wanted to reorganize in peace. Not long ago, they heard that the Tsing-Yi army in Jiaoping district had gathered their troops and horses and left in full strength. They did not know what their purpose was. That's why I brought some troops over to check out the situation. The old man was overjoyed. His eyes brimmed with tears as he said excitedly, What a coincidence! Magistrate Lu didn't know that the bandits in black had indeed left Jiaoping district, leaving only about 1,000 people to guard the county. I've heard that Magistrate Lu is noble and righteous. He led the villagers to get rid of the evil bandits in green. I'm about to rush to Chang'an district to look for Magistrate Lu. If those evil bandits find out about this, I'm afraid they won't let the people of the city go. Jiang Pengji seemed to have finally understood. Is it because of this that the old man asked me? Jiang Pengji asked. The old man raised his hand to wipe the hot tears from the corners of his eyes. He said, Exactly. I only hope that Magistrate Lu is benevolent and righteous. He can protect the innocent people of Jiaoping district so that they won't be harassed by the evil bandits in green. If the county magistrate agrees, this old man can die in peace. Jiang Pengji looked hesitant. The old man's heart was in his throat. Not long after, her eyes became very determined. Since the villagers love me so much, how can I let you down? Jiang Pengji said. When the old man heard the good news, He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. His pale face was flushed. Life is like a drama. It all depends on one's acting skills. Watching his lord's perfect performance, even a shameless person like Qiguan Rang was secretly ashamed of her. His lord was so shameless that he could rest assured. In fact, it was not that the old man did not suspect Jiang Pengji's identity. However, she had a noble demeanor. Her face was handsome and upright. The troops behind her were strong and powerful. The clothes that the troops wore were clean and tidy. Their vital parts were covered with leather armor. The weapons they carried were of superior quality. The old man was not ignorant. Just by looking at the lineup, he believed 80% of it. He tested Jiang Pengji's attitude toward Jiaoping district. He saw that she truly pitied the suffering of the people. She spoke eloquently about various methods of disaster relief and saving the people. He thought that the standard of the son of a top aristocratic family was only as good as hers. The old man could not pick out any mistakes. The more he talked, the more satisfied he was. The old man was a rare intellectual and cultured person in Jiaoping district. He was a good teacher. Some children from poor families came to him to study. He would also reduce or exempt their tuition fees at his discretion. He had a very good heart. He acknowledged that Jiang Pengji was the legendary young district magistrate Liu, who could create miracles and loved the people like his own children. The other people also believed her with relief. Qiguan Rang led them into the city. Looking at the open city gate of Jiaoping district, he fanned himself with his feather fan. His lord was too capable. He always felt that as a counselor, he was facing the dilemma of being laid off and unemployed. They welcomed him all the way to the district headquarters of Jiaoping district. The place had already been occupied by the people. The Xingyi army could also capture and kill them. Jiang Pengji sat calmly on the seat of honor. General Ping Tian of Jiaoping district did not expect that the owner of the nest had already changed hands after they left for just half a day. Outside, the morning light was slightly intoxicating. So far, out of the 4 districts of Fengyi County, 3 districts were already in her hands. Maolin district would probably be hers soon. Liyun, Xueqi, and the others really did not disappoint Jiang Pengji's high expectations. They took advantage of the night to launch a surprise attack on Maolin district and broke through the city gate. The defense of Maolin district was even weaker than that of Jiaoping district. There were only 2 or 3 guards on the city gate. Liyun drew his bow and knocked an arrow under the city gate. He shot through the guards on the city wall. With a good start, the morale was greatly boosted. In comparison, Maolin district did not even manage to form a decent attack. The resistance was even weaker and insignificant. The battle was like a hot knife through butter. Using the ladder to climb up the city wall, Liyun took the lead and rushed to the front. Wherever his silver spear passed, the enemy's corpses were strewn on the spot. Xueqi was well versed in the ways to strike the local morale. Perhaps it could be said that he had become shameless after hanging out with Jiang Pengji for a long time. He ordered the troops to attack forcefully while shouting loudly, "The Xingyi army's destiny is near. The entire army is defeated and fleeing." During this period, reinforcements arrived one after another. However, faced with the tyrannical siege chariots, improved crossbows, and ballistae, the Xingyi army charged in batches and died in batches. In addition, the words shouted by the troops caused the Xingyi army's morale to hit rock bottom. They no longer had the will to fight. The Xingyi army was just a motley crew. They had lost their backbone and their morale was low. The number of Xingyi army in Maolin district was pitifully small. The combat power that they could exert as a whole was even more pitiful. In just half a day, they had already occupied the entire Maolin district. Compared to the crisis in Xiangyang district, the sneak attack and siege battle in Jiaoping district and Maolin district was like a small game. Chapter 527. Feng Jin was probably the only one who knew if he was going to explode. He turned his gaze back to Xiangyang district. The Xingyi army at the west and north gates had been completely defeated. Some were dead and some were injured. Many of the Xingyi army saw that they had lost the upper hand. They panicked and ran away, leaving thousands of corpses behind them. Looking at the mess on the ground, Feng Jin raised his hand to wipe his face with a solemn expression. He wiped away the blood on his face. He asked the soldier in a hoarse voice, "How's the situation at the south gate?" The sky gradually turned from black to greenish-white. The sun rose from the horizon and dispersed the darkness. Looking at the sky, the battle at the south gate should have already started. He just didn't know the situation. The soldier panted heavily. The man said, "The battle at the south gate is in a stalemate. General Luo is leading his men to resist." Feng Jin looked at the city gate that was blocked by bricks with pity. If he had enough men around him, why would he need to block the city gate? If he didn't block the city gate, he could send a team with high mobility to harass the Xueqi army from the back and attack their morale. Both sides wouldn't have fought for so long. The defense line of the city wall was almost broken by the Xueqi army. This made Feng Jin rather vexed. He glanced at the crowd and said, "The wounded should all rest. Except for those guarding the city gate, the rest should leave the city with me." After blocking the west and north gates, they could still go out from the east gate. They could outflank the Xueqi army from the back and harass them. As long as the south gate was strong, the Xueqi army couldn't take it down after a long time and the back was harassed many times. Their morale would definitely plummet. A soldier was covered in blood. He looked like a bloody man and was in a terrible state. He stopped Feng Jin. "Sir, you mustn't. You just need to tell us what to do. There's no need to risk leaving the city." Feng Jin said resolutely, "I'm not powerless. I can protect myself. Soldiers, there's no need to say more." The soldiers were physically strong. The high-intensity training in the military camp was not just for show. After a night of fierce fighting, they still had energy. However, Feng Jin was the son of an aristocratic family who lived an exquisite life. His body was better than ordinary people, but compared to these rough men, he was still a lot weaker. Now, even he could grit his teeth and say to continue fighting. The other soldiers naturally had high morale and were eager to fight. The situation at the south gate was slightly better than Feng Jin's side. Relatively speaking, it was easier to defend. Even though the Xueqi army at the south gate had more people than the north and west gates, they did not have as many siege weapons. Without sufficient siege weapons, the losses of forcibly attacking a city would be quite terrifying. Luo Yue was also an experienced person. His defense was airtight. It made it difficult for the Xueqi army below to move an inch. Even so, the soldiers on the city wall were exhausted. There were always soldiers who were shot by arrows. If they were lucky, they would only be lightly injured. If they were unlucky, they would lose their lives. However, no one had the time to mourn. They could only focus on dealing with the enemy. Just as Jiang Pengji had said, there were only the living and the dead on the battlefield. There was no distinction between men and women. Looking at the tacit cooperation of the troops, Luo Yue felt a little emotional. He gradually agreed with the women's battalion that his lord had established. If all the women stayed behind to support their husbands and raise their children, it would indeed be a waste of nearly half of the human resources. After going through rigorous training, they were able to fight on the battlefield with weapons in hand. Their performance was no worse than that of the male soldiers. In today's world, women and children were seen as a vulnerable group and needed protection. However, most of the men could not even protect themselves. How could they protect them? Even if Luo Yue's views made him feel that women should not go to the battlefield, his rationality told him that this was not wrong. If others could not protect them, why couldn't they work hard to protect themselves? 10,000 troops were more than enough to defend Xiangyang District. But what about Chang'an District, Maolin District and Jiaoping District? It was almost a fantasy to rely on 10,000 troops to defend a district. It could be predicted that after conquering the other 3 districts, it was imperative to expand the troops. However, the North had experienced a series of natural and man-made disasters. There was a huge loss of young and strong men. When the time came, it was unknown how many soldiers they could recruit. If there were more female soldiers, it would indeed greatly relieve the pressure on the military camp. With these thoughts in his mind, Luo Yue continued to command calmly. He thought that there would be a stalemate for a while. Unexpectedly, there was a sudden commotion from the rear of the Xueqi army. The originally orderly attack instantly became a mess. Using the height of the city wall, Luo Yue could see the movement from afar. His eyes lit up and his heart flashed with ecstasy. Soldiers, the Xueqi army at the north and west gates have all been killed. He raised his arm and shouted. The troops seemed to have been injected with a shot of adrenaline. Joy flashed across their originally tired faces. The north and west gates had already won? Everyone knew that Xiangyang district was attacked from both front and back. While the troops at the south gate defended against the Qingyi army, they were afraid that their rear would be breached by the enemy. Now, Luoyue told them that the rear was safe. They only needed to defeat the enemy at the front. How could they not be excited? The morale of their troops rose again and again. The Qingyi army's morale continued to decline. Feng Jin led the troops to charge forward and make a detour to harass them. The city gate was impregnable. The Qingyi army attacked for a long time without success. Behind them, there were cavalry harassing them. After a few times, the morale of the Qingyi army had already plummeted. They were not in the mood to fight at all. Their defeat was irreversible. No matter how their leader shouted, the Qingyi army still fled in all directions. The attack below the city gate became weaker and weaker. They were unable to pose a threat to the city gate. Feng Jin originally wanted to lead the troops to chase after them. However, when he thought of the current defensive strength of Xiangyang district, he could only give up this tempting idea. Luoyue wiped the bloodstains on his face. He bowed to Feng Jin and said, "Thank you for rushing over to help." The battle at the south gate lasted for more than 2 hours. However, the battle at the north and west gates started at 4 in the morning. Moreover, it was a battle at night. It consumed a lot of energy. Looking at Feng Jin, he must have led the troops to help the south gate right after the battle ended. If not for that, even if Luoyue had the confidence to defend the south gate, he would have to use up a lot of defensive equipment. Feng Jin took some time to catch his breath. He raised his hand to help Luoyue up. He said, "Coach Luoyue, you don't have to thank me. This is what I should do." Luoyue looked at the direction in which the Qingyi army fled in resentment. He said fiercely, "It's a pity that they escaped." Generally speaking, when the defeated side fled and lost the will to fight, it was a good opportunity for the victorious side to expand their victory. Now that he saw the remnants of the Qingyi army leave, Luoyue naturally felt bad. Feng Jin said, "It's okay. This debt will be repaid one day." Little did they know that the Qingyi army that they said escaped by luck were very unlucky. Chapter 528. She left Qiguanrang behind in Jiaoping district. She had the final say in everything. At his command, Dabai sprinted off into the distance, taking the lead as fast as he could. The Qingyi army in Maolin district lost their morale. They fled pathetically and were utterly defeated. After they ran for a distance, a few chieftains began to organize their men. Naturally, they moved slowly. When they managed to organize more than half of the defeated soldiers, they would face a new disaster. A small chieftain spat on the ground and said unhappily, "What do you mean by Xiangyang district is empty of troops? F***ck. Does this look like it's empty of troops? It's harder to chew than a bone. Not only is it hard to chew, but it's also hard to chew. We suffered a huge loss this time." The accomplice beside him sat on the ground and wiped his face with both hands. He said fiercely, "We'll remember this today. We'll make those people in Xiangyang district pay the price in the future. They made us suffer such a huge loss. We can't let it go easily." There were also some who looked into the distance dejectedly. No one knew what they were thinking. In the distance, the Qingyi army gathered in 2s and 3s. Each of them was hunchbacked and had ashen faces. They looked like defeated roosters. There was no valiant and high-spirited aura on them. It made people feel unhappy and secretly scolded them for being a bunch of good-for-nothings. Some of the small chieftains were very unhappy with these soldiers who swayed according to the situation. It was just a defeat. Was there a need to be like this? Weren't they still alive? As long as they were alive, there would be a day when they would make a comeback. These useless people ran away faster than anyone else when they saw that the situation was not good. "Now we'll organize our men and return to Maolin district first before making plans." They originally wanted to take advantage of the situation. Who knew that not only did they not take advantage of the situation, they were also counterattacked. It was really embarrassing. They could not covet the fat piece of meat that was Xiangyang district. Now they had to bring their men back first to prevent the rear from being empty for too long. The leader of the Qingyi army then remembered that there was a shortage of manpower in his backyard. However, he was not very worried. Anyway, Maolin district had been exploited cleanly. There was no profit to be reaped. The nearby Xueqi army did not even look at it. Why would they covet it? However, they all forgot that the other Xueqi army would indeed not covet it. However, it did not mean that Jiang Pengji was not tempted. Now, the 4 districts of Fengyi district were in her hands. She was now the district magistrate of Xiangyang district in name, but in reality, she was the chief of Fengyi district. Not to mention Dongqing, even in other countries, was there a county chief younger than her. Jiang Pengji was completely confident that within a year, Fengyi County would be revitalized and prosperous once again. After Fengyi district was settled, the next step would be the entire Wanzhou. The members of the Xueqi army who had gathered were completely unaware of the impending danger. They sat on the ground in 2s and 3s, their stomachs rumbling with hunger. The weapons in their hands had already been abandoned when they escaped. Hungry and tired, many of them simply found a place to sleep. Looking at the disorderly Xueqi army, a few leaders were so angry that their faces and necks turned red. They wished they could whip these people to wake them up. There are actually no pursuers coming from Xiangyang district. A small leader opened his mouth in surprise. The other person was slightly more knowledgeable and replied, "They didn't go out of the city to pursue them. It's most likely because there aren't enough people in the city to hold them back." The leader said, Tsmen, had in. It's hard to deal with them when they don't have enough men. What would happen if they had enough men? Don't boost others' morale and belittle your own. Maybe they think there's no need to chase. Even if they don't have enough men in the city, can you break in? His companion was speechless. They looked at each other in silence, helplessness in their eyes. It was a good thing that the enemy did not chase after them. Xueqi army had more time to organize their men. Just as they heaved a sigh of relief, a member of the Xueqi army scrambled over to report. "General, the enemy is coming from afar." What? The enemy was chasing after them? The leaders of the Xueqi army were shocked. One of them, a strong man with a dark face, asked, "Enemy? How many?" The pitiful member of the Xueqi army stuttered, "The enemy is moving very fast. We can't be sure of their numbers." Useless. What's the use of your eyes? The strong man with a dark face angrily grabbed the man's collar. He lifted him up and threw him on the ground. The member of the Xueqi army rolled twice in the mud. He fell until he was dizzy and saw stars. "I'll go take a look." The member of the Xueqi army snorted. He strode to the place where he could see the enemy. He didn't know if he didn't see, but he was shocked when he saw. Indeed, as the member of the Xueqi army said, the enemy was moving very fast. They were only a few hundred meters away from them. Behind them, there was a thick cloud of dust. It was like the sound of horse hooves. It was impossible to determine the size of the troops chasing after them. However, there were hundreds of enemies running out from the cloud of dust. There were at least 3,000 pursuers. The other side had 3,000 victorious troops, valiant and high-spirited. Although their side still had nearly 4,000 men, they were all exhausted and had no battle experience at all. If the two sides were to clash, they would have no chance of victory. They could only experience the feeling of being utterly defeated once again. At that moment, the leaders couldn't help but want to retreat. They wanted to escape as soon as possible. As long as there's life, there's hope. As for the members of the Xueqi army on the ground, what did their lives have to do with them? On the other side, Jiang Pengji was leading 500 people to charge forward. The remaining 300 people came out in batches from the cloud of dust. She made use of this camp to create the illusion of a large army chasing after them. In reality, she only got a few soldiers to chop a few trees. Then she dragged the branches and ran back and forth on the ground, raising a thick cloud of dust. There were many flaws in this plan, but it could deceive the Xueqi army for a while. The audience in the streaming room saw that she was so cunning. They all ridiculed her. De sells straw shoes. By the way, when you used this plan to deceive people, did you think about Lord Zhongfei's feelings? Ergu Wu Dideo. Sigh, it's rare for Lord Zhongfei to be smart for once. His plan was plagiarized by the streamer. I'm upset. Of course, the crux of the problem was not the plan, but the deception. As long as they were deceived, based on their dispirited mentality after suffering a defeat, the possibility of them fighting again was extremely small. Even if they fought, their combat power was not enough. Jiang Pengji was completely confident that she could lead 700 to 800 people to surround and annihilate the 3,000 to 4,000 members of the Xueqi army. The pursuers are here. Everyone get up. The pursuers are here. Run away quickly. There were loud shouts. Many members of the Xueqi army woke up from their sleep. When they heard that there were pursuers, their bodies had already reacted one step ahead of their minds. Run. The further the better. Most of the members of the Xueqi army were running blindly. One could imagine how little resistance Jiang Pengji encountered. White excitedly increased its speed. The Xueqi army was just a tired and defeated army. How could they outrun it? Some members of the Xueqi army saw that they could not escape, so they simply turned around and wanted to fight to the death. They did not expect that they could not even get close to it. White raised its front hooves high and rewarded them with a hoof. It hit their chests. They heard the sound of bones breaking. One by one, they fell to the ground, spitting out blood and breathing weakly. Jiang Pengji waved the sharp spear in her hand. Her moves were very simple. Every move and style was bound to reap lives. Wherever White passed, the person and the horse cooperated well with each other. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.